Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Supervisors, it is now 7 o'clock. I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board on this Tuesday, August the 18th. First order of business would be the honoring of the flag and a moment of reflection by Supervisor Bates. Is Supervisor Bates online? Okay.
I just got a notification from Dave Hayden that she will be calling in.
Okay, I'm not sure how to proceed then. We'll do the honoring of the flag first. Supervisors, please unmute, and we will together recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. I don't see Supervisor Bates on yet, so I'm going to do a little flip here and proceed, and we will do the moment of reflection at the moment that she joins us. So Samantha, will you please call the roll?
I believe you meant County Clerk Loomis to call roll.
Oh, sorry. Clerk Loomis. You're muted. Janet, you're still muted. There.
I'm sorry about that. Supervisor Gibson.
Here.
McKinney.
Present.
Knight. I did see him on.
I saw him.
I'm going to consider him here. Pagonis. Anton. I did not see him on at this point, so I'm going to consider him absent. Zook.
Here.
Chilson.
Here.
Stelgis.
Here.
Maury.
Present.
I also saw that he was on earlier.
Yeah, he just said
I'm
present.
He said present.
Thank you. Coffee.
Present.
Henning.
He's here.
I saw him and heard him before, so I'm going to consider him here. Bates. Is she on? Did she call in?
She's not on the list.
Okay. Russell.
Here.
Gatlin.
Present.
Smyer.
Here.
Hambeck Boyle.
Here.
Neiman.
Here.
Dunning.
Here.
Wilkie.
Here. Present.
Anderson.
Present.
Thank you. Buckfield.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Leary.
Here.
DeLuca.
Here.
Jansen.
Present.
Schroffnagel.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Kronk.
Here.
Jefferson.
Here.
There is 27 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. Please let us know when either one of the two might join, especially Supervisor Bates.
Supervisor Pagonis is on.
I have her present.
This
sorry.
is Supervisor on the phone. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Welcome. You are just in time to do the moment of reflection.
And I'm aware, I've been listening. So, fine. Would you like me to do that now?
Yes, please.
Ready. As I'm in my mind, as I look around the county board room, I'm seeing groups of very committed people that are here to serve in a way that helps our community and makes us all stronger. When I came onto the board some years ago, at that point in time, there were 3 women on the board. This week, it looks a great deal different right now. This week, we are really taking time to celebrate what I would call a movement, not a moment, but a movement. It's really a celebration that is in regard to the passing of an amendment to the Constitution, the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. That actually began long before this particular date. In 1878, the very first resolution was introduced to Congress to give women the right to vote. It was the very first attempt, and it failed. There were several other attempts over the next number of years that did not pass and failed to make a difference as far as women voting was concerned.
Cheryl, I give her one. I give her one.
Pardon? It was not until May of 21st of 1919 that the House of Representatives passed this amendment to the Constitution. The Senate passed it on June 4th, and then move ahead to August 18th, 1920, when this particular amendment was sent to the states for ratification. On August 16th, 1920, it became law. However, that law didn't really give every woman the right to vote. There was an exception for Native American women, Asian women, Black women, women that could not read or pass a literacy test. And so basically it was not until 1965 that Native American, Asians, Black voters would actually be voting with consistency. It would take 45 years before women of color actually were allowed to vote. We are still concerned about voting, all of it, and hoping that this year, this special year, will make us ever mindful of making it easy, available, and indeed an American right. So thank you for this opportunity, and hopefully we will implement what has happened over the years, allowing women to serve fully in the government of this country.
Thank you, Supervisor Bates. Next on our agenda is public comment. I'm not sure if I asked Samantha or Janet. Do we have public comment?
Chair Smyer, approval of journal proceedings first.
Thank you.
Here.
Is she online?
Chair Smyer,
Yes, ma'am.
approval of the journal proceedings first, and then I am Janet, and there is one person going to speak, and then I do have 5 that I need to read.
I apologize. I jumped over an item. So we're looking at approval of the Journal of Proceedings from our extended meeting on July 21st and 23rd. I believe we can do both of those at the same time. Do we have a motion? Remember, we're doing it by chat.
Motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Are there any deletions, corrections, or additions to the Journal of Proceedings? Raise your hand to speak, please. I have to scan the whole list. I see no hands raised. I see none raised. So, let's see, I think, contrary to what I said before, I believe that we could do this by voice vote. Simple matter. So, supervisors, please temporarily unmute All those in favor of approving the Journal of Proceedings of July 21st, indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Now we will go to public comment.
Howard Ludwigson is on the phone and he will speak first.
Thank you. Mr. Ludwigson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Smyer and the rest of the County Board Supervisors. I live at 5537 Bayview Drive. I've experienced your positions many times before, being a County Board Supervisor, also an officer of the board. I do want to speak briefly to you tonight. I know that you don't like to have a lot of long presentations here for these types of things, so I'm going to try to get to the point here. I'm calling because I think there are many citizens out there that are concerned about the budgeting in human services. I do support the forensics audit. I think that is overdue. Several reasons for that. One, when I was on the county board, I always looked at neighboring counties and other counties of our size to see what are they doing and where are they at in terms of some of the different issues. On this particular issue, we really seem to be out of step. Our neighboring counties do not have this type of problem in human services. We certainly don't hear about those problems from Marathon County, La Crosse County, some of those others that have larger cities in them. So I think we need, as taxpayers, we need to know, okay, why do we have those types of overages for a number of years now, even after the county board has been fairly generous in your annual budgeting for that particular department. Also, I'm concerned about the number of years that this is happening. If you get one of these anomalies, fine, you take it out of your fund balance. It's not good. You try to replace that money in there. But this has been going on now for a number of years. So I think as taxpayers, we need to know, okay, what's happening there. And also the amounts concern me. When it gets into several $1 million like that, now you're talking about some really big numbers. And I think as taxpayers, we need to know why is that and why isn't it taken care of in regular budgeting. The public really needs to understand and have a better idea about this department. And the way that you're going to get that is to take a look at it with an outside source. Say, okay, here's what we've discovered. Here's some things that could be different. And a forensics audit is going to do that. So I would strongly encourage you to provide those types of things for the taxpayers by doing a forensic audit. I'd also like, as a concerned citizen, to take a look at the addition of a position in human services for $65,000. That's probably all fine and good, but I wouldn't do that until after you have an idea of what's happening in that department. Otherwise, what would the job description be of that position if you aren't aware through an audit of what's really happening over there? I'm fine with adding the position, but let's do that after we have all the information that's needed so that that position has an idea of what it really needs to do. Those are the comments that I've got. Have a good meeting. I thank you very much for this opportunity, and good luck with your continued endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ludwigson. Do we have anyone else for public comment?
I have 5 that I need to read, Supervisor or Chair Smyer.
Please proceed. Thank you.
The first one is from Mel Janke, Jahnke. Dear County Board members, I have been watching and reading news coverage about the most recent financial crime committed at the Department of Human Services, DHS, to identify where there are insufficient financial controls that allow this to happen and where the missing money went. I also understand that there may be some county board members opposed to that investigation, but why would they? It is well documented that numerous financial crimes have been committed in Eau Claire County government in the past months and years. I am in full support of this forensic financial audit taking place immediately and recommend the board take the necessary actions to ensure these crimes are not committed in the future. If fraudulent attempts are made in the future, immediate corrective action should be taken. This will help ensure that fiscal responsibility is restored throughout DHS and all other county departments. It will also help reestablish public confidence that Eau Claire County tax funds are being managed well. The cost of this audit should not be the issue. Look how much has been lost already. I can't imagine why any board member acting in the best interest of the county taxpayers would not want to take any and all actions to prevent this from happening in the future. I serve on numerous boards and would never tolerate inaction when inconsistencies of any sort are discovered. I would like this statement read into the record at the Monday night committee meeting, which would have been the, I think, Human Services meeting or Finance and Budget, I'm not sure, and the Tuesday night county board meeting. I would also like a response acknowledging that this was received and read. The second one is from a Cindy Kuehn, Kuehn. Her comment: considering the ongoing fiscal issues of Eau Claire County DHS, I'm in strong support of further investigative audits to identify operational issues that have been negatively affecting Eau Claire County taxpayers. In these financial difficult times, it is important that the county board provide proper stewardship of the funds entrusted to them by the taxpayer, as well as program funding from state and federal governments. The third one is from a Robert Carr, C-A-R-R. Good evening. I believe strongly that the DHS audit is necessary. Not only is it a good idea, but to not move forward would be negligent the board's most basic requirement to be responsible with the taxpayers' money. To not move forward would also cause doubt about the board and its fiscal responsibility in general. I would also ask why anyone would not want to move forward. What, if anything, are they trying to hide? It is time to remove the blinders, find the problems, and hold those responsible for them accountable. The next one is from John Arnett, A-R-N-E-T-T-E. Hello, Eau Claire County Board Supervisors. My name is John Arnett. I have 30 plus years of law enforcement experience. I have learned of questionable transactions that are very appalling. Swimming pool, fence, skydiving lessons, purchases. I believe this would be a great opportunity for a forensic audit to be conducted alongside of the current investigation. I certainly hope County Board Chairman Smyer does not table or try to say this is not important to move forward. I believe the residents of Eau Claire County deserve to know where their tax dollars are being spent. We definitely need to get to the bottom of this wasteful spending and hold some folks accountable. This also means county supervisors have to step up. Thank you. The last one, but unfortunately the longest. My name is David Carlson. I live at 2212 Altoona Avenue, Eau Claire. I'm writing today to address the recent National Guard COVID-19 testing conducted in the Eau Claire County Jail. This testing was done on Tuesday, August 11th. 49 of the 80 people tested that day were incarcerated individuals. At that time, there was 176 individuals incarcerated in the secure portion of the jail. 19% of that population was African American. The director of the City County Health Department asked if I would write an email to be sent to individuals in the jail via the kiosk that are in every cell block. I wrote an email encouraging everyone within the jail to cooperate with testing, and Lieutenant Dave Ristall disseminated that communication. I received a Facebook message from one of the individuals in the Eau Claire County Jail's mother. Her son is African American. She told me her son had read my correspondence and asked the corrections officer that he be provided the opportunity to test. This opportunity was never given to him, even though others on his cell block were tested. Another elderly African-American male on that same block was not tested as well. A portion of the mother's message said, and I quote, "They came in and tested some people, but he didn't get tested. I don't know if it's because he is African-American or what. This is not the first time he has had problems with them. About a year ago, he was given someone else's medication and got really sick. He really wants to talk to you for help." End quote. Today, the Eau Claire County Jail still has 19% African-American population. 20% of the PO holes are African-American. 14% of the secure detentions, African-American. 28% pending revocation, African-American. 18% pending trial, African-American. 40% waiting for prison, African-American. No African-American Huber holes. For all the talk this county does concerning racial equality and fighting systematic racism, there has been little action. There are county board members who fight every day to bring this to light in the public, but given the lack of progress, I must also assume they are county board members either disinterested or opposed to real change. That is a problem. Every African American in the Eau Claire County Jail should have been provided the opportunity to test that day. That seems like a no-brainer, considering the pressure the Sheriff's Department and the Eau Claire County Jail has had on it for the last 5 months. African Americans are much greater risk for negative health consequences related to COVID-19. Once again, this county finds itself behind the curve in addressing systematic racism regardless of any of its anti-racism resolutions or rhetoric. If you need an example of commitment, look to the City Council and the Eau Claire Police Department. Their actions since the murder of George Floyd have been decided based on unprecedented and disenfranchised populations of this community.
Excuse me, Clerk Loomis. Is
Yeah.
there much more to the comment? Because,
Not, I'd say maybe minute and a half.
well, we are at 3.5 minutes. So I'm going to limit it. Give us a few more, maybe 20 seconds.
Okay, sure. Sure, just cut me off when you're out then. If you need an example of changing the police culture, look to Chief Ruckus. They really consider what you would hope someone with the power would do for you under current circumstances in this community. If your life depended on it, because there are African-American community members and other people of color in Eau Claire County whose lives depend on it. Every member of this county board must understand that changing the system of oppression will be uncomfortable and inconvenient, and it will require a daily commitment to change. Every individual must express their commitment to change daily, hourly, and by the minute, the same way my black skin and that of every other African American expresses every negative connotation that has been associated to it since the 1600s. The entirety of the Eau Claire County Jail needs to be tested, and testing for people of color in the jail must take priority. This is only the beginning of what must happen for this county to regain the ground it has lost in fighting systematic racism over the last 3 months. 2 more sentences. I would recommend every county board member attend the CJCC meeting tomorrow morning as well. There will be discussion on the HIDTA designation, and I am certain there will be public comment from many community members who share my concerns over the implications of this federal money. Thank you for taking the time to read this public comment. And that is it.
Thank you, Clerk Loomis. Excuse me. Is there anyone else who wishes to present public comment? I hear no one else. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda will be reports to the county board under 2.04.320, beginning with Sean Lentz from Ehlers regarding our file 62, which we will take up later, providing for the sale of approximately $13,935,000 general obligation refunding bonds. Mr. Lentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to touch base, is the pre-sale report available oh, there it is. Perfect. Thank you very much. And if I could ask that we go to the last page on the pre-sale report. Perfect. Thank you very much. For county board members, since the earlier debt issue that we did this year for the county that had two purposes: the financing of the county's 2020 capital projects and also the refinancing of the 2010 bonds that were outstanding. That issue, when we did it, the refunding saved over $2 million for the county by reducing the debt service. Following that result, Norb and myself, as well as the Finance Committee, have had a couple discussions about are there other issues that the county has outstanding that are candidates to refinance, given that interest rates are at historic low levels currently. Now, the traditional type of refinancing, and the one that's allowed under IRS rules since the most recent tax bill was approved a couple of years ago, only allow a governmental entity to refinance existing debt if we're within 90 days of the payoff date or the call date for that issue. The 2011 B bonds that you see on this exhibit on the left side of the page are their call date. The call date for the issue is September 1st of 2021. So certainly it's more than 90 days out from today. But what I've been discussing with the Finance Committee is the possibility of sending out requests for proposals to potential buyers of a refunding of the 2011 B issue that would involve locking into a solution now within the next couple of months with a closing date that would be later down the road within 90 days of that September 1st of 2021 call date. And based on preliminary discussions, the section on the right side of this exhibit, which shows a new issue of $13.9 million at preliminary interest rates that could be available with this additional caveat that we wouldn't close on the issue until within 90 days of that September 1, 2021 call date, are reflected there in green. And you can see that the savings, if the county could get this sort of a result, are over $200,000 a year, and over 10 years over $2 million. So in discussing this possibility, which is an extraordinary type of refinancing, with the Finance Committee, the recommendation was to proceed with the request for proposals and flush out whether these sort of savings are available and present that back to the county board to finalize if the requests for proposals come back in a favorable nature and yield the kind of savings that we're seeing here or something close to this. If we do not get positive responses that yield this kind of savings, the county will still have the option next year of doing the traditional refinancing, just like we did with this year's issue. And what the Finance Committee and Norb had asked of me is to discuss this option and get your approval to proceed with that request for proposal this evening and answer any questions. The concept is, in big picture terms, we have the ability, given the very low interest rate market, to potentially save significant dollars for the county. Finance Committee wanted to proceed with seeing if that can be brought to fruition. And the backup plan is, if it doesn't work out, we still have the option in the future, starting next year, to do a more traditional refinancing if that seems to be the option that's going to yield better results for the county. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you if there's any questions of me. And there's a resolution later that would move this process forward should the board like to do so.
If any member wishes to ask questions of Mr. Ehlers, this would be a good time. However, we'll reserve any discussion of the merits of the proposal to the time when we deal with the resolution. Is there any member who has a question for Mr. Ayers to clarify?
Schneider,
Supervisor Schneider.
are other counties doing this?
Yeah, I don't know specifically of counties. I do know of a couple of school districts that have done something similar to this, where they're doing a refunding or a forward, I would call it a forward purchase refinancing in advance of that call date. So there are other governmental entities. I can't think offhand of another county that's proceeding with it, though, right away.
What's the downside of it? Follow-up question.
Yeah, and the Finance Committee had asked that. So what we talked about with the Finance Committee was what would be the premium that we're paying now in order to lock into an interest rate now, even though the call date is not until September of next year. And based on preliminary numbers, the interest rates you see on the exhibit are about 30 basis points or 0.30 higher than what the current market is. So the one downside would be, let's just say for the sake of example, that we locked into the rates you see on the exhibit and we save the $2 million that are shown on the exhibit. But 9 months from now to a year from now, when we get to September of next year, interest rates are actually exactly the same as they are currently, which would be 30 basis points or 0.30 lower than the rates you see there. We would save, under that hypothetical, we would save more money if we would have waited rather than proceed now. And in discussing that with the Finance Committee, I think the feeling was that interest rates could move those 30 basis points. And I think the phrase that was brought up was bird in the hand. If we have solid savings that we're comfortable with now, we ought to explore that and see if we can achieve those savings.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Chair. I think you just kind of answered my question, but so if we lock in at the proposal rate now and the interest rates in 2021 are actually better, we can't change or go for the better rate. We're stuck then. Is that correct?
Yes. The most likely there'll be a new prepayment date that will become a part of this issue. We can ask in the RFP for the possibility to have the issue be prepayable at any time, and then you would reserve that option. But what's much more common and much more likely to yield the lowest interest rates we could get is a call date that's probably, I'm estimating, in 2027 or 28. And if we do that, which would be much more common, we would not have the ability, should lower rates be available in 2021. We would be locked into what we would get this fall.
If you research this, do you have to lock in with the proposal, or can you research it and see what people would be willing to support and then not lock in?
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, the approach that we've laid out is we would be soliciting proposals to select somebody to move forward with to get a final interest rate proposal, final term proposal. And if we are unhappy with the responses that come back from the RFP and they're not yielding the kind of savings that the county would like to see to move forward on this, we would reserve the ability to reject all the proposals and then move forward with into next year and see if we're want to do the refinancing at that time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson.
Yes, and so it's my understanding that the interest rates being as low as they are now is sort of unprecedented and uncommon, as we even have the ability to finance. Is that correct?
Yeah, the current interest rate environment is at historic low levels, correct?
So, so if it wouldn't be surprising if they were to go back up, and it would be surprising if they stayed the same, or is there just no? It's not exactly how I wanted to phrase it, but is there precedent for these type of interest rates to be more volatile, or is there not really any precedent?
Yeah, I let me know if this does not answer your question, but when we talked about this with the finance committee and they asked a lot of questions on the same vein as the question you're asking, it would not be at all unusual for interest rates to move more than 30 basis points within the next year. That could very well happen. And given that we're at a historic low level, it's certainly no guarantee, but given that's where we're at right now, I think the likelihood of them going up rather than down there's more in that direction, more pressure or possibilities in that direction than further down from where they are now.
Yes, thank you.
Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What traditionally is the impact on these interest rates of an election?
Yeah, that's if I knew that, I would be planning for the stock market right now. I would hesitate with as crazy as everything is right now and all the different variables that can affect interest rates to say if the current president wins, they're going to do this, and if his opponent wins, they're going to do that. I just don't know that there's any way with all the variables to say that. Now, all that being said, I think the environment is currently very, very good, and I think as we get closer to the election, you may start seeing something that indicates where they're going to go, depending on who's winning in the polls. But I would hesitate that either direction to state that either direction is going to lead to going up or going down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisors Anderson and McKinney, please lower your hands. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, so I understood, you're saying if there was a request for proposal that had an amazing interest rate that we just couldn't turn down for this year, you negotiate or try to negotiate or could try to negotiate the lack of a prepayment penalty. Was that my understanding? So that if interest rates went lower even next year or within the next 2 years versus the 2027 or 2028, that could be negotiated in, or do they tend to hit you with a higher interest rate if that's part of the negotiation?
Yeah, you got it right at the end point. So the more we ask for greater flexibility on being able to prepay or do another refinancing, the more likely that the interest rate will go up because they don't have as much certainty that they're going to get this particular return on their investment for this period of time. So I would say that we should count on that prepayment date being in that 2027 to 28 range on this issue in an attempt to get as low of interest rates as we can.
Do they allow you a request for proposal that compares both?
We can put in there. I would suggest language to the finance committee and NORB such that we're expecting a call date in and around this year. If you in your proposal are willing to have an earlier call date, we welcome that offer. So something on that line.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. Mr. Ayers. Mr. Lentz, do you have any additional information to offer?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda, under oral reports, is a CLA audit review. Mr. Guyan?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
I think so.
Perfect. All right. Okay, so I see a presentation there that you can click over to the audit summary. There you go. Perfect. So tonight, my name is Brock Guyan. I'm the principal in charge of your annual external audit, and we're looking at 2019 this evening. So what you have in front of you here is a summary. It's not the audit financial statements. It's a summary of the results that we pulled together. It's more informational and gives you some additional data. I shouldn't say it's more informational, but it's what we use in this kind of a forum. So those of you that have seen this before should look pretty familiar. But otherwise, for those that haven't, this will be a kind of a condensed version where everything's kind of in one spot. So on the summary here, I'd probably turn you to page 1, and that's where I'll start. So we met with Finance and Budget Committee back in July. I went through this in detail, so I'm going to kind of hit some high points now, but I do want to highlight some items for you. I'm at your disposal, so if you have any questions at any point, you can jump in here. Certainly stick around at the end too if you have questions. So do want to acknowledge your staff here. Been working on quite a few improvements over the last several months, and specific efforts here since last March I just want to point out too. So as everyone knows, kind of the audit approach has changed a little bit over the last 6 months, and just know that your staff was very responsive and pretty agile considering what we needed to go through to make sure that we're doing our job to audit your books. So what this page here does, though, is it kind of summarizes the reports we issue, and there's several of them. I'll hit these quick. Maybe at the you see that there in the top of the page, one called the Audit Opinion. So you did have a financial statement which is drafted by your staff, pulled together for 2019, and we've issued a report on that, and we've issued an unmodified. So what does that mean? When we audit, we're looking at the amounts and disclosures and support for those for what's in that financial statements. And what we found is they're all materially correct. So from there, we look at your internal controls and issue a separate report. And on this one, you'll see one there, and don't get too caught up in the language, but there's something called a material weakness. Some people refer to these as findings. If you look back, you'll see this item pop up probably every year you've had an audit. Not to diminish the importance, what this means is it's limited segregation of duties. When we come in and we look at how you do things in your accounting, we feel that there isn't proper segregation between functions. We call it incompatible functions. What you end up doing is you have people that can handle more than one aspect of a transaction cycle. Very natural when you have competent people doing their job and they're able to do more things, that becomes very common. So this is an extremely common for governments, governmental entities, even the size of Eau Claire County. To note, there has been several improvements, as some of you have been aware. For instance, over the last couple of years, you've reviewed your accounts payable process, how the vendors are set up and approved, your HR side, your payroll, receipting, those type of things. Why you still have this at this point anyway is something that's reported, some ongoing efforts here even in 2020. Occasionally you have some change due to normal turnover, which you've had with various accounting personnel. But you're looking at accumulating data in the departments and the reporting that they're doing. And some of you probably recall about a year ago too, there are some efforts in HHS that were started last summer where you're looking at some things, and there's probably 8 or 9 things there that you're working on to tighten up as well. So there's a lot of things in process when it relates to this particular item. But you have a job here as a board too. Your governance and your reviews and approval are very important in the system as well. I do want to point out I have a recognition on here too, because I want to point out that there were no material audit adjustments proposed by us as your auditors. That had been something that had been reported for many, many years, and it's extremely rare. What does this mean? It means we came in and we found the numbers were materially correct. We probably consulted on several items, but by and large, all the reconciliations were done by your staff. So if you look at, since we've been involved the last couple of years with you guys, your entries have gone from 4 years ago, there were 60 entries we proposed, down to 28, down to 5 last year, and now there's 0. So you can see that trend there. It's and I just didn't want to miss recognizing your staff, because that's very incredible accomplishment, very uncommon. The last thing I'll point on this page, and then I'll take some questions here, is maybe on the second here where it says compliance. So in addition to looking at the numbers and disclosures, we're checking out your grant agreements, other contracts, things of that nature, to see if you're in compliance with requirements that are on set for the county. And we didn't find any problems associated with that, so there's no findings reported there. So hopefully all that made sense, but I'll pause here before I start digging into the numbers to see if there's any questions.
I see no hands raised, Brock. Go ahead.
All right, so the rest of this document here, I'm going to skip over the middle section. Pages 2 through 5 is a standard, what's called a governance letter, so we don't need to get into the details of that. Pages 6 and 7, there's some new standards that are primarily directed towards your finance staff, so they're aware of that for the upcoming years. So we'll move you to page 8, so you can follow along here. And then page 8, I think actual physical page 8, so you'll have to go down a little bit yet. That PDF page right there. Perfect. Okay. So here's where we provide you some financial information. What we do is here was we consolidate it down to just a few lines, where if you went to your 100+ page booklet, you're going to have a lot more detail here, but we also are able to give you a 4-year comparison so you can see the trend. So on this particular page, if you can read it on your screen there, I'm going to go to the second to last row of this page, and you'll see a change in fund balance. And you'll see a negative $1,045,000. So that is the operational results for the year. So expenses exceeded revenues and other sources by a little over $1 million. To give you some insight on this result, if you looked at purely the operational results, so the programs that are run by the general fund, they're actually positive results of just over $2 million. But you were again, the general fund, important note here is it's the backup fund for every other fund in the county. So there were some transfers out to support and prop up a couple other funds. So $235,000 went to the anti-drug program fund, and $2.9 million went to HHS. So the result of all that combination of activity resulted in the $1 million loss for the year. So what does that do to the financial strength of the county? I'll move you up the chart there a little bit. There's a bolded row called unassigned. You'll see $9.8 million. That's your reserves at that point in time. So 12/31 of 19, at the end of 19, if you were to liquidate all your receivables and pay all your bills, that's what would be left essentially. And that's what you have to live on going into the subsequent year, 2020. Going forward. So what do? We compare that $9.8 million to what you spent during the year. So a little bit further down, you'll see a row called expenditures for $35.3 million. And when you take those two numbers, divide them against each other, you get that percentage at the bottom, 27.8%. You can see the trend there. It's been fairly steady, even in spite of the $1 million losses. There's a few factors that go into that. Your expenses were pretty flat for the year. So when you're taking your expenditures and your reserves, your percentage did drop about 1%, but by and large held pretty close to where it was, even in spite of the $1 million. You have a policy that you're going to live within a range of about 20 to 30%. So that is your policy, so you're within your own policy. We do have a general rule of thumb, if you were to ask us as auditors, where we want to see our counties. And we want to see them having, we word it a little different. We say we'd like to see them have a minimum of 25 to 35 or 33%. The thinking there is if you think about a big picture, that's only 3 or 4 months worth of reserves, right? So again, the general fund being the financial backer for every other activity, there's a variety of reasons why fund balance is important. That's kind of why we hold on to that as our rule of thumb. So you are within that range. We consider it a minimum, not necessarily a target. And lastly, for some perspective, we work with 42 counties in Wisconsin, so the majority of them. We do some benchmarking. We take the average of what we see out there, and the average for the counties at least in Northwest Wisconsin, so it's more comparable to you guys, is 48%. So quite a bit higher. You can take that as you like, but just know that you're below that typical for Northwest Wisconsin. So before I move on from the general fund, I want to emphasize this importance on fund balance because it kind of relates to something we'll talk about next. But the importance of a strong fund balance hits in a couple places. Obviously, you have limited ability to make decisions if you have a lower amount, right? Whether it's programming, emergency reserves, such as what we're in right now with COVID, stuff like that. General fund has to be the backer. It potentially could hurt your bond rating. So when you're looking at interest rates, like you were talking here in the previous presentation, they're going to look at your numbers and want to invest their money where they'll know they get a solid return and surety there. Cash flow is also important. Some of you know for a county year, cash flow is not level throughout the year. You've got very high peaks and low lows, and you have to protect against those low parts. And so those are kind of my preaching points, my soapbox for talking about general fund strength. So by and large, you're in good shape now. Something to keep an eye on because you have a trend here of deficits building up over the last several years. Any questions on that?
I see no hands raised and hear no request to speak. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that the conclusion of your presentation?
Nope, I'll point out a few additional things. So I just wanted to talk about the general fund specifically because that can be a point of interest. So I'll move down to the next page. And this covers more of your funds. Here we just have your year-end reserves for each of these funds, so a lot more condensed. Item 2 is your special revenue funds. Thing I'll point out here is your Health and Human Services Fund, Fund 205. So you look there, we do have negatives, pretty large negatives. Up through 2017, you had a policy of clearing that to zero. So if it was a negative, you'd wipe that out and bring it to zero with a transfer in from the general fund. And that changed in 2018 because of the activity that was going on there and growth in programming primarily and timing of reimbursement and recognition of that revenue. So as I mentioned earlier, there was a transfer into this fund by the general fund. So the overall operating loss for 2019 totaled $3,768,000. So $3.8 million. So from that loss, general fund transferred in $2.9 million. So the ending net loss for the year ended up being $861,000. Some of you may have heard that in a previous meeting, possibly if it was discussed. But that compiled on top of last year's or 2018's loss of 1.3 million. So that's where you get the 2.1 that I'm showing there now at the end of 2019. Hopefully that trail makes some sense. And I did express this last year. I'll say it again here. I mentioned it at finance, but this is one that you'll want to take a look at simply because the level of losses that you've been incurring here, they're not sustainable. When I look at your figures and numbers, there are some, let me back up a bit. This has the potential to impact your general fund's financial strength, right? Obviously, if you continue to incur losses, it potentially could wear on your general fund, and you're kind of in that sweet spot right now over there where you wouldn't want to go too much lower.
Excuse me, Brock, sorry.
Yep.
The hand raised. Supervisor Pagonis.
Brock can finish the page. I
Sorry.
have a follow-up question to the 3.7, but he can finish the page.
Thank you. We'll come back to you.
And it'll just take a minute here too. I wasn't going to point out too much more on this page here. You'll see the Fund 212 anti-drug program. As I mentioned, that went positive now this year. It went to 130,000 positive because the general fund transferred over 235,000. Debt service funds largely held, actually increased a bit. You did pay $10.4 million in principal and interest during 2019. The increase from last year is primarily due to rebates that you received on Build America bond interest that you recorded and received. Capital Projects Fund, you'll see there that there is a deficit. These are negative numbers at the end of the year, 63,000. It did improve from the prior year. A lot of that is due to timing. You do have a deficit remaining going into 2020, and I know you have a plan in place to address that in your 2020 budget. So you should see that turn around. So yeah, let's take that question now then.
Supervisor Pagonis, followed by Supervisor Beckfield.
Thank you, Brock. This is Stella. When you came to Finance Committee, you pointed out when you talk about Fund 205, and then you put in out some numbers that I'm not sure I wrote down quickly enough, but you ended that paragraph by saying it takes us to 3.7 million over budget. Could you just repeat those numbers? What I wrote down was 36 million in expenses and 31 million in revenue, but that doesn't equal 3.7. So I think I wrote it down wrong.
Okay, sure. Yeah, if you were to bring up your financial statements for 2019 and you look specifically, or you could bring it up in your finance as well. So when you look at HHS, that fund, total revenue was $40,900,000.
40?
40, yep. 40.9.
Oh.
This is for the year, we're 44.7. So you can see that gap there. That was your deficit for the year, the 3.7, from an operation standpoint. So if you took all the programming you did, the cost that went into it, and the reimbursement of revenue that was being able to be recognized, and the fees and charges, stuff like that. Now, that's the 3.7, 3.8 million. The general fund then transferred in 2.9 million. So that helped cover part of that loss for the year. That brought you down to 861,000 as the year loss. So at the very bottom line, after all the activity flowed through, was a loss of 861,000 after support from the general fund.
And that's what I wrote down, was that the net loss was 860,000, but the net loss is 860,000 because of a transfer in of 2.9 million.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. And does that then translate back to what your cautionary notes were, the depletion of the fund balance?
Exactly right. Yep. So if you think about when I say it's not sustainable, I mean, I think you could grasp pretty quickly here too that the general fund is not in a position to transfer $2.9 million every year. I think you'd impact your programming that you're able to do in the general fund. You'd have to reduce some of that.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you. Supervisor Beckfield.
Thank you, Brock. Very insightful information. My question, is La Crosse a good comparable to use in comparison? I know we're about the same size population as Eau Claire, but trying to do comparables overall. Is it a fair?
It can be. I'm looking at probably St. Croix, Barron Polk, kind of like that, I guess. Just when I'm picking off the top of my head here and the proximity of it, you're running a lot of the same programs. So when you look at, a business person, you're going to look at margins, stuff like that. For example, you're going to look at each one of these programs in HHS and say, are we incurring more costs going in from reimbursements from programming and grants, or not? So, you can be very comparable from one county to the next, but I have to break it down to the grant programming and what you're offering for services specifically, because there's a lot of ground covered in that department.
Okay.
A lot of things going on.
And then I just got a quick, you might be aware we had an error in our accounting last week in regards to, I don't know, $210,000 to $230,000 that's being moved from 19 into, or 20, from last year to this year. I don't know which year that's being in. So if you put that back in, would that affect our dollar amount by another 130,000? So it'll be over 4 million? Or is that going to be shown in the 2020 loss category? I guess
that will be, yep, correct. Good observation there too. That will be, the way it's recorded now is appropriate, meaning, so typical, you have to think of it as a cutoff. At some point in the year, you have to basically split off your finances to where you're not going to book things anymore. And it's most common for counties to start doing that in either April or May. The reason being is most of the good information coming off your CARS report coming from the state is available by then. And the that point, you're really motivated to get the numbers set so that you can finalize your audit so you can get into your budget season. So by and large across the state, most people they're reporting off from an accounting standpoint on May 15th or that May, when the May data comes in. What you're seeing there and what you're referring to is there's two parts to it. From what I understand, if I'm talking about the same thing you're seeing there, and that is additional information coming available when the June information comes out in July. So at that point, there is an argument that yes, it relates to the prior year. However, you have established your cutoff by your operating policy or your finance policy, and so you're not going to pick that up anymore, even though you know about it, because historically every single year you cut off in May. So you have this thing where you have a consistent cutoff every year, and not playing the game of moving it back. So that is something that will pop up in your 2020 numbers.
Thank you.
Yep.
Supervisors Pagonis and Beckfield, please lower your hands. Thank you. Supervisor Hamburg-Boyle.
Hi, I just wanted to comment, Supervisor Beckfield, because I had a little information about La Crosse when we went to referendum on the school board. The Eau Claire Area School District is the 8th largest in the state. La Crosse is the 13th largest. And given their spending within their school district and their community up until we had our 2016 referendum, given our different journeys, they did have $222 million more dollars of spending or money available within their public schools than we had, even though we served more students. So just to kind of give you that illustration, if that helps.
Thank you. I'm just looking for some comparable to take our statement against other statements, just to get a feel for it. Thank you, though. I will take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Beckfield and Supervisor Hamburg-Boyle. I see no other hands raised.
Schneider?
Oh, sorry, Supervisor Snyder.
Broad question. What's the difference in this kind of an audit versus a forensic audit?
Sure, that's a good question. All right, so a year-end financial audit is going to, it's very specifically defined. We're looking at various things. The sampling is very defined by audit standards. We're looking at supporting documentation for the numbers that are being reported. We want to make sure the financial statements are accurately reporting that information and presenting it. When it comes down to how things are tested, that's primarily the difference. So in forensic audit, it's very specific to certain objectives. So what is it that you want to get out of it? It's typically looking at fraudulently created items, if that makes some sense. We're looking for things of fraud and that nature as well in a financial audit, no doubt about it. So to give you an example of what we're doing, we'll take a look at one of the grant programs. We actually test over 40% of all the grant dollars that flow through the county. But, breaking it down one by one, program by program, we're taking a look. We're looking at the reports that are being sent to the regulators. We're looking at the supporting invoices that support the expenses that are being applied to it. And we have to make sure all that stuff jives and matches. Then how that flows through the finance system. We're looking at your controls of how you do approvals over that transaction as well, those type of things. So that's the focus of a financial audit, because all that builds up into your financial statements. What a fraud audit will do is look at, say, that invoice that you have on file that you paid a bill on. And it's going to look to see, is there anomalies in there that look to make it look like it was fictitious, right? Was it made by somebody's home printer and then the county paid it and it didn't go to where it was intended? We're looking for those things too, because we do some certain tests in a financial audit, like we're testing addresses of your vendors, and we look those up to see are they legitimate businesses, things like that. So we do a variety of different tests which kind of overlap. But again, a forensic audit is very, very specific to objectives. And I've heard, it was obviously mentioned here earlier in the meeting as well. And I think there'd be a focus on certain activities within the department there if you were to go down that route.
Thank you. Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you. And maybe just sort of a follow-up question to the one that was just asked. I'm curious, just generally in your experience when you're doing these audits, have you ever recommended a forensic audit be done? Just in generally speaking, in what you see, year to year doing audits, have you in your experience, or do with your entity, have they recommended just based on what they've seen?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. You'd be extremely surprised what we run into on an annual basis. Actually, it's more common than you like to think, but but I mean, we're the 8th largest accounting firm in the nation, so we have a lot of clients, and we bump into it on a fairly regular basis, and so for sure, yeah. To answer your question, we do.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilkie. Supervisor Wilkie, you're still muted.
Can you tell us which programs you ran tests on? And I understand when you run that test, you don't run through every billing, but you said with one, at least 40%. Can you tell me which programs you chose to test? And I think one of the programs called the Sparks program. Did you test that one?
Let me look here. Well, I can pull this up in a quick response here, but I'll do my best. Broadly, to answer your question, there's a lot. There's smaller ones in there, but I can, this will come up for me quickly.
If you can't locate it right away, Brooke, why don't you email to the county, and we could share that with the board?
That's probably a good idea. And like I said, it's a pretty lengthy list here, so I'll do that. I'll accumulate that, send it off to you tonight yet, and then I'll send that to Norb, and you can forward it on to you guys.
Thank you.
Yep.
Schneider with another question.
Supervisor Schneider.
Would it be fair to ask you whether you would recommend a forensic audit for us?
I would recommend some additional procedures for sure. Again, and that follows up on my comments about how it's not sustainable, the losses there. Whether it's a concern about the fraud side of things, or maybe just to get a better understanding of it, if nothing else. But again, yes.
I see two hands still raised, Supervisor Cronk and Supervisor Wilkie. Are you making a request to speak, or did you forget to lower your hand?
I forgot.
Okay, thank you for lowering your hand, please. Brock, do you have any concluding comments? Any of the words of wisdom?
A couple more, hopefully, unless I'm up on time, which I could be here, but a couple more items.
I'm not timing you, but go ahead.
Okay. All right. If you go to the next page, we should see highway and airport fund. These are quick. We just look at a couple things here.
Excuse me, Brock. I'm sorry. I missed a hand raise. Supervisor Coffey, did you wish to ask a question? Supervisor Coffey? You're still muted. There you go.
I'm so sorry. So my question is a follow-up about the forensic audit question. If you're thinking about, I understand that our weakness is limited segregation of duties. Would that be the best audit for us to have? Would be a forensics audit, or do we need a process audit to help us to understand how to do our processes different and have more checks and balances as we do those processes?
Okay. Well, based on, and maybe this is my opinion, I guess, but if you're looking at what you've pursued in the last 2 years, for example, I know what I referred to earlier as far as the work done at the end of last summer, early fall. You did bring someone in to take a look at more of the process side of things. Are you accumulating financial data in the right manner that's consistent with the other counties in the state, for example? We looked at that particular and recommended some improvements there that'll help you. What that would do is help you identify where where to get some answers. That certainly can't hurt. That type of, those type of recommendations are pretty valuable. The forensic work is quite a bit different. And you're looking at if there's concerns of maybe why, help bring to light some things, or just to even to give yourself some comfort that, you know what, this is just a programming issue. We need to get control of what we're spending compared to what we're taking in, which could very well be the answer. But, it would give you some answers to that too.
Thank you. Supervisor Gatlin.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
My understanding, and if you look it up in the dictionary, a forensics audit is specifically looking for a financial crime. It's not like a department process review. It's specifically looking for fraud, embezzlement, a financial crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wilkie, your hand is still up.
It's intended to be up.
Okay, go ahead.
Brooke, I understand some of these questions kind of awkward for you and put you on the spot, but as long as they're happening, I'll give you another one. If you have a suspected alleged theft that a criminal complaint has been filed, but in the course of the police investigation, they indicate in that criminal report, quote, "This is no audit, and the bookkeeping was in disarray. They didn't have half of the receipts." Is that the kind of case that you look at a forensic audit for the specialist to come in and try to sort out what was the amount of lost money and are other charges warranted in addition?
Yep, I think that's a very clear example of what that would be geared towards right there. Obviously, there's a whole different set of procedures seen in a way of looking at things under a forensic audit. And in the scenario you outlined there, that would be a pretty good candidate.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brock, I cut you off. You said you had some concluding points to make.
Right. Yep. Just to wrap up the rest of these funds here. Page 10, which you're on there, Highway Department, when you're looking at the results for the year, you're going to go to the second to last row of that section, right in the middle of the page. You'll see operating income or loss, negative $744,000. So not terribly unusual to show this kind of a loss necessarily in highway. There were positive results before contributing close to $8 million of highway infrastructure to governmental activities. So I wouldn't necessarily look at that as a big negative or a problem. Your airport fund, again, this was a little unusual, very second to last row at the bottom of the page if you want to scroll down a little bit. You'll see a big number there, 10.4 million. That's positive. That one is primarily due to a change at the state. So the state does contribute very large infrastructure capital items to the airport fund. So it helps build infrastructure or runways, stuff like that. So these can be very big dollar items. And because they change the way they provide data to counties, it's more timely, it's improved. So this information comes from DOT, resulted in a very large capital contribution for the year. So that's why you're seeing that very large, unusual $10 million figure there this year. Last page. So if you go down one more page, internal service funds, maybe just a comment here. You are now running health insurance and shared services through this internal service fund. So you'll see that number there. So that's just a bit of a change. And then lastly, at the bottom, number 7, that's a summary of your long-term debt obligations. I think I mentioned earlier, but you did issue $9.9 million of bonds. You repaid $8.8 million of bonds. So that's your change, what you're seeing up above there, and what's left. So you paid the premiums on those down. And maybe the very last item to note here, at the very bottom, there's a percentage. So you'll have to scroll down a little bit further. You'll see a percentage. What that is a measurement against your statutory limitation of how much debt you can borrow that's tax supported, right? So if you're levying to pay principal and interest, there's an established statutory limit. You're at 19.6%. So what that tells you is you do have capacity should you need to borrow more tax-supported debt. I'll tell you, though, that it's not practical to get, anywhere near 100%. I think I mention this each year. Mill rates would be very, very high because you're supporting a very large debt load. I would also point out, too, because this was brought up at Finance in July, but just point out that long-term debt borrowing is up and total reserves for the county are down. So that's just something that they wanted pointed out here as well, highlighted to the group, to the board. So anyway, that is the extent of my comments for tonight, but
I have
if you want more questions.
I have one question apparently from Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you happen to know in the airport fund, I know that they received a lot of CARES funding. Do you happen to know if that is included in that large number for the airport?
No, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to put my finger on that real quickly here either. I'm only commenting.
Isn't that this year?
Yeah, but it was early in the year. It occurred, I think, in March, April. So it would have shown up in that's why I say if you cut it off in May, it might have shown up in there. I was just wondering if you knew off the top of your head, but if you don't, that's fine.
No.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that's showing up in 2020.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brock, just back to the airport fund, that $10,400,000, that's going to be held in the airport fund balance, correct? It's not available for use by the rest of the county.
Absolutely. And it's actually tied up in capital assets. So if you look ahead, this is unlike the general fund, right? The general fund doesn't record capital assets on its balance sheet, but the airport fund does. It's a full accrual statement. So if you look on that page, you'd have to go up a page on the screen there, but you've got your capital assets went from 29 million to 38 million. And so the entire amount is not spendable. It's tied up in fixed assets. Exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does that conclude your report, Brett?
It does, yep.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The next oral report is Q2 financial update from Director Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just have a couple of slides that I will go over to highlight some of the key takeaways from the Q2 year-to-date financials. I would encourage all the supervisors to review my full report and the financial reports on Report Central under the Q2 county-wide reports. They are out there. I'd also make note that the audit full financial statements and the executive audit summary that Brock went over are posted out on the finance website under the audited financial statements as well if you wanted to dig into some of those financial statements in more detail. So in general, the county financials year to date through the second quarter were actually slightly better than they were through the same period in 2019. Clearly, we did see some revenue impact from COVID, particularly in the second quarter, but fortunately, we also saw reductions in expenditures that mitigated those revenue reductions. I would say that some of those expenditures, I think, were timing and delayed expenditures, and some were directly related to some of the revenue reductions where there's a correlation between revenue and expenditure. So I would still say the overall impact to the revenues due to COVID-19 are still uncertain. I think we've talked about that a number of times, and we'll continue to talk about that both through the COVID task forces as well as updates to the board. Overall, relative to the general fund, which I think is pertinent, especially after we had all this conversation about the general fund relative to Brock's presentation, year to date through Q2, the revenues were at 36.1% of the budget compared to 37.6% a year ago for the same period of time. That equates to about $300,000, if you will. So that's, relatively speaking, on a pure dollar basis, how much we were down kind of year to year. Relatively speaking, it's offset again, if you will, by the Q2 expenditures, which were 41% of the budget compared to 44.3% of the budget in the same period in 2019. Once again, I would say some of that is timing and delays of expenditures, and some of it is directly related. That equates to being down year to year about $600,000 in expenditures. If we talk about the enterprise fund activity that we were just talking about, highway and airport, on a year-to-date basis through Q2, they have improved, largely driven by highway expenditures being only at 30.6% in 2020 versus 42.8% in 19. Again, there's lower maintenance costs certainly that has been seen, as well as some, again, delayed expenditures. We also did see an increase related to the airport that we mentioned earlier with CARES funding and some other funding that they got that was also a contributing factor. Lastly, on this page, we certainly had a very strong January and February sales tax collection, very strong from what we've seen historically, and that really has made a difference in kind of counteracting the COVID-related reductions we have seen in sales tax that have occurred from March through June. So relatively speaking, we're slightly below where we were last year at this time with sales tax collections. But again, we did see reductions in the months of March through June, and we'll wait and see what continues.
Excuse me, Doug, we have a request to speak. Supervisor Gatlin.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you say the highway expenditures at 30.6%, that's 30.6% of levy dollars?
No, 30.6% of their budget.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm only speaking relative to their entire expenditure budget.
Thank you. Please proceed, Doug.
Okay, second page, Samantha. So let's talk a little bit about some of the expenditure categories. So personnel expenditures year to date, we're actually fairly flat, which is a little bit interesting. Personnel expenditures amounted to $21.3 million compared to $21.1 million in 2019. So that is certainly relatively flat. For comparative purposes, we had open FTEs were 44 at the end of June of 2020, and they were 40 at the end of June in 2019. This is kind of a remarkable thing that I see on a relative basis, that we have somewhere around 35 to 40 or so kind of open FTEs or vacant positions at any point in time. So it seems to that we've kind of continued to see that relativeness, so that we don't see much shift in the personnel expenditures relative to vacant positions, because we seem to have about the same amount on kind of a continuous basis. We did see reductions in the year-to-year wages and overtime, though, if you were to break it down one level lower. And again, you can see this if you look at Report Central and the personnel reports, but wages and overtime are down, but we saw offsets by increases in payroll benefit costs. So when you roll that all together, the total expenditures, again, as I said, are relatively flat. On supplies and services, we definitely saw a reduction significantly year to year, 18% for 2020 at this point in time versus 35% last year. Again, I'd say overall lower department expenditures across the board, but also is where we see the significant reduction in lower highway maintenance supplies and expenditures. So that definitely had an impact. If you look at the economic indicators, and if you look at my report, you'll see a list of economic indicators that we look at on a regular basis. And those are just to get an understanding of kind of what's going on in the economy. There are things like zoning and permits and real estate transfers and penalties and interest collected. The only economic indicator that's lower year to year is the interest earned on investments. And as we've seen, that is significantly lower. Obviously, it's lower if we're talking about potentially borrowing money at 1% when Mr. Lentz was doing his presentation. So what's being paid to us on our investments is sub that, if you will, and we're seeing that. So lastly, to leave on a positive note, driven by the lower expenditures, And the earlier capital funding, our cash position at the end of Q2 relative to a year ago was about $5 million better. So I'm not here, luckily, saying, we have cash flow concerns. Obviously, we are constantly looking at cash flow and monitoring it. But right now, I'd say we're, relatively speaking, at a better cash position than we were a year ago.
Supervisor DeLuca, followed by Supervisor Wilkie.
Mr. Chair, is the reason we're not seeing so much of a deficit in the whole highway, is that because of our what do I want to say, it's called wheel tax or whatever? Is that supplementing? Is that why we don't see the changes so much?
Not so much, because the wheel tax is really going to support capital projects, road and bridge repairs. So I'm kind of looking at more on the maintenance supplies. It was a much lighter winter, for example, on supplies and maintenance than what it was a year ago. And so I think there's some of that. I think that there has been some conscious efforts, and I can't put a number on it, by the highway department to be conscious of their spending, and some projects I think have been delayed. Possibly some of the members of the highway committee could maybe speak more clearly to that than I could. But when you roll that all together, they're definitely down.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Wilkie, followed by Supervisor Pagonis.
Yes, Nora, Finance Director. Question for you. There's no question that it's weighed heavily on every member of the board's mind, thoughts and concerns, and we've had some discussion, a significant discussion about the deficits in the past with DHS. We can't undo that. My question is going to center on kind of currently where they're at. I've been trying to get some kind of handle on a projection given their current trend. Granted, things can change the last 6 months, but we're halfway through the year. And I haven't been able to get a good feel for, given the current trend, where to expect that they're going to end if they stay the same. I mean, kind of putting you on the spot, but obviously you've watched this closely, and the staff I know are trying hard and watching it closely. Where are we at with that projection currently? What is the projection of a net deficit at this point for 2020?
Well, I guess I would answer that by saying we've got kind of multiple estimates, if you will. So the COVID task force, as you know, I've gone to the departments a couple of times now and asked for, give me your projection, best case, worst case, what do you think is most likely? As an update to the board, I will be sending a notice out to departments to do that once again, if you will, to be able to report back to the COVID task force and ultimately to the board as well, as we continue to monitor that closely. That's one data point. There, I'd say, in the last one there was, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was anywhere from break even to maybe, $400,000 or $500,000 deficit. That's one data point. If I look at a data point that's part of the budget package submission that was done in July, there's an estimate there that's part of that budget package submission. I believe that estimate was a deficit of $191,000.
I guess I'm looking for your data estimate, not mine any longer. Okay, mine is much higher than that. Any of those, and I know staff are doing the best they can to come in with analysis. But you, as a finance director, you see those numbers. You've got it in your bookkeeping. You see the reports that generated from the department that they report to their governing committee. What, as your expertise as finance director, what would be your projection? Granted, there's a lot of variables and that can change, but given the trend and the knowledge you have at this time, What's your guesstimate?
Well, I'll be honest, Supervisor Wilkie. I think this question has come up before, and I'm not as close to the data as the people in fiscal DHS, and I'm going to certainly say that up front here. So anything I'm doing is really more speculative. I'm not as close to what could be coming in. There's lots of revenue adjustments that occur. If you look in the May time frame and their May report, I think there was about $2.4 million of revenue adjustments. So we're constantly kind of looking at the numbers in a little bit of hindsight, right? Which obviously limits it when you're trying to do a forward-looking
Right.
projection. My guess. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm guessing right now that they're going to hit somewheres between $500,000 to $750,000. Now, I don't want to be right again this year, okay? I want to be totally wrong. I said that same thing last year, okay? But I would appreciate, Norb, you taking a look at the numbers in your system and theirs, and at some point fairly soon, getting a projection from you.
Well, I certainly can do that, and I certainly will tell you that as I ask for the next set of data to report back to the COVID task force, that will be another updated set of projections that will provide both, worst case, best case. What do you think is most likely?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'll have anything to provide anything much greater, but I can certainly look at it and give you my perspective.
Well, you have high credibility. Please look closer at the numbers and tell me what you think.
Okay. I'll do that after we get the next projections.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. Norb, this is Stella. I think you should take the compliment that Supervisor Wilkie gave you. I thought it was notable. So recalling our late summer, early fall cash issue last year, where many of us were very stressed out, to what do you attribute the cash position now at the end of second quarter to be $5 million better than it was a year ago?
Well, I'd say there's multiple things. I'd say, certainly we borrowed earlier. That was, so we're talking that we have, funding earlier, and that'll help. But there's really been, I'll say a, fairly dramatic slowdown in expenditures. Some, again, I will say I think is a slowdown versus actually expenditures going away. So, I think that definitely, has an impact on the numbers, especially if you look at, where are we at with, capital purchases, if you will. Capital purchases through the second quarter were, $900,000 versus, which was about 8%, I think from my report, about 8.5% versus last year at this time, we were at 26%. So it means we spent capital much faster last year relative to where we're at than we're doing this year. So I think things like that certainly impact the cash flow. And again, I think along with just overall reductions in expenditures.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gatlin, are you wishing to speak?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
I had a question, but before I address my question, I just wanted to comment, being on the highway department, that Director Kirk is absolutely correct that there has been very conscious efforts, not only in spending, but in my short tenure there's been several positive hires with a set of eyes and new updated skills, general inclusion of assistants and managers in the overall operation. But my question, Kirk, is when you say payroll, benefit, costs, what does that include?
That includes, health insurance, WRS, those kinds of things, HSA, all that kind of rolls into that.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kirk, are you finished with your report?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Our next oral report is from the County COVID-19 Task Force, Administrator Schaaf.
Good evening and thank you. The majority of the presentation tonight will be handled by our Human Resources Director, Jessica Rubin, who will give us an update on the vacancies that are part of the Bridge Plan and vacancies in general. The COVID Task Force continues to look at a variety of economic indicators that are outside of our internal operations. As you have seen, Finance Director Kirk is keeping tabs on many of our internal indicators and the external indicators, including those related specifically to stimulus dollars that are coming into the county, have been monitored, and we continue to watch those. At this point, we know of no additional stimulus dollars that will be coming to the county, but we will continue to look for that. There are many variables at this point that could still have an impact upon our county operation. Our human resources team actually conducted a back-to-school survey. We are looking at ways to allow for the needed flexibility and options for our workforce that they will need as children are contemplating going back to school. Looking at what will happen in the next few months as the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire students return and schools begin again will be a potential pivot point for our community. So we do continue to watch that. And with that, I would turn the microphone as well as the camera over to Jessica Rubin, our Human Resources Director.
Jessica, before you begin, Supervisor Gatlin, and I see your hand raised. Did you have a question? Oh, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair Smeyer. I guess I will just kind of begin this short presentation with a preface that this report is a living document. So as it was shared in the COVID task force, the meeting on August 5th, this data will change and sometimes daily as our organization continues to be flexible and agile in order to continue to meet the needs of our consumers and our community in the most effective and efficient manner. The next slide. Basic overview of this report. We will briefly touch on the Bridge Plan outline with the goals and recommendations. I will go over the process to post vacancies and then go over the vacancies that were identified through the Bridge Plan. We will discuss the positions that have been filled since the Bridge Plan, the 2020 internal transfers, and then funding sources for those recruitments that are in process. So during the county board meeting on May 5th, supervisors voted to approve the resolution that authorized that Bridge Plan related to the pandemic. It also created a task force to address the issues that are related to the crisis and identify the solutions to those issues that have been created by the reduction in revenue driven by the pandemic. The main goals of the Bridge Plan are to create that bridge, a financial buffer to protect the county's financial assets and to provide time for the task force to identify opportunities to continue to adjust to the ongoing pandemic, with the intention of the participatory process remaining flexible, adaptive, and responsive. The next slide goes over the goals and recommendations. So in consultation with department heads, targeted areas were identified for reductions while ensuring that we as an organization are able to continue to provide mandated statutory and public health services to our community. The plan included meeting current challenges while understanding that additional action would likely be required. We will continue to use vacant positions and attrition to prioritize activities. And just to highlight, the positions that are eligible for recruitment during the COVID-19 crisis response are positions that are funded by grants and aids, critical service areas such as emergency management response. And it is the continued expectation that managers are continuing to review those processes and functions within their departments and utilizing technology to improve those processes, defining the necessary services and assessing tasks. That is all part of reviewing vacancies when they occur, and I will touch on that later. But it is part of that implementation as well of that strategic vision that has been articulated by you folks, the board. For all positions that are currently vacated or are anticipated to be vacated, the positions are not eliminated from the organizational chart, rather funding has been withheld. We work to redeploy affected employees into positions that are opened and are either critical to recovery or funded by grant or intergovernmental revenues. So these would be employees who may also be subject to layoff. The process to post a vacancy, as touched on in the previous slide. So department has, when there's a vacancy that occurs, department has, it's the expectations that those supervisors and management staff are really evaluating the needs and looking at that position to say, is it necessary and essential? What responsibilities might be able to be transferred or reallocated? How is this position funded? Does the workload necessitate filling this vacancy? And how can this position be updated for additional efficiencies and effectiveness? All while forecasting the needs of the department. Thereafter, the request, after they've done this analysis, the request would then be approved if it's determined that it is necessary to fill that position. And that's approved by the administrator and the HR director. And then the recruitment is posted. We have not posted any internal only to date. However, every single recruitment that has been posted after the bridge plan has been posted internally for 1 week, then posted externally. If a position is only posted externally, that would occur if a position has been recruited for in the past 6 months since being filled. This next slide highlights our full-time equivalent positions. So the 32 positions highlighted here are all full-time positions. And you will see there's a breakout from each department that has identified their vacancies that are going to be held open through 2021 on that bridge plan. So administration, ADRC, clerk of courts, facilities, and finance all identified 1 position. The highway identified 4. Human resources has 2. Human services has 17. Planning and development has 2, and the sheriff's department also has 2. I did have a request to break that out by an estimated percentages as compared to the overall department size. And so looking at the individual departments, administration has a total of 4 full-time staff on their org chart. And so that the 1 position is 25% of their department's positions. So I'll just go down the line. The ADRC has a total of 26 FTEs. And so that they're at 4% reduction on the bridge plan. Clerk of courts, 20 FTEs, and they're at 5%. Facilities has 12 FTEs, so they're at 8%. And by saying 8%, I'm meaning that's the reduction, not that's the percentage of staff that they have. That's the estimated percentage of reduction. The highway has 64. well, I skipped finance. I apologize. Finance has 8 FTEs on their org chart, so their reduction by 13%. Highway has 64 FTEs with a reduction of 6%. Human Resources, 6 FTEs with a reduction of 33%. Human Services has 217 FTEs with a reduction of 8%. Planning and Development, 17 FTEs with a reduction of 12%. And the Sheriff's Department has 117 FTEs with a reduction of 2%. Are there any questions on that slide?
I hear none, and I see none at this point. Please go ahead.
Supervisor Bates, I have a question.
Please raise your hand, Supervisor Bates. Thank you.
I'll try on the phone.
Okay.
That's hard. You just made a comparison of the percentage that the particular vacancy would occur compared to the number of individuals. And that may be useful in some respects. But I think also you have to look at workload. If you compare the complexity of programs, the number of citizens served, the individual amount of personal contact that's necessary, it really, again, this may be one way of comparing, but I believe that particular percentage does not take into consideration the workload that's involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I hear none and I see none. Please go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you. So on this next slide, it highlights the positions that have been filled since the bridge plan was approved. So these positions, I just need to clarify that they were not any of those positions that had been identified on that bridge plan. They were actually either in the process of being recruited for, or they were those that were identified as critical to fill and necessary and essential to the organizational operations. And that really truly is the rationale behind our filling vacancies at this point. We also are looking at how it's funded, and again, just looking at the necessity and the critical need. So for the numbers here, we have facilities having 1 vacancy filled, and there is a split position between facilities and highway. That was 1 position. The ADRC has had 2. Highway has had 1. So in addition to that split position with facilities, they have also had 1. Corporation Counsel has had 2. And when we refer to Corporation Counsel, we are also referring to child support. And Human Services has had 1. Next slide. Thank you. I wanted to take an opportunity to highlight our internal transfers that have occurred over the 2020 year. There have been a total of 29 internal transfers. I think that speaks to our ability to retain staff and in the desire for our personnel and our employees to want to remain with the organization. So I believe that this is a really positive thing here. We have the total number again is 25. So if we look at up here, 17% did have a department change, and that was a total of 5 transfers. So that means they went from one department into another department. DHS had 9 internal transfers. So that means that 9 transfers occurred just within that department. So they transferred from one position to another within DHS.
Excuse me, Jessica. We have a request to speak from Supervisor Wilkie.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Jessica, a question. I'm a little puzzled when I've been walking through all these graphs. I was under the understanding that the county clerk has a vacant position of 0.5, I believe it is. And obviously, or at least in my opinion, the position is necessary and essential given the election. In fact, we had some discussion and communication on that. It being absent from any of these charts, transfers, or being hired, am I to assume that the recruitment of it is currently happening?
I can tell you that I needed to get an update on that. However, there are positions that are not the full-time FTEs. So when I go back to slide, I'm sorry, where the 32 positions were highlighted, those again were the full-time FTEs. We do have an additional 13 part-time positions that are identified on that bridge plan that can range anywhere from a 0.15 FTE to a 0.73 FTE. And so that's where
if I understand you correctly, then none of these charts represent any of the part-time people positions that are on the list. Is that correct?
That is correct, Supervisor.
Okay. So we wouldn't know. Well, maybe you can answer me, being the Human Resources Director. Has it already started and they're aggressively recruiting what I would see as a very essential and necessary position in a very small office, given we've got the presidential election coming up in only 2 months and with likelihood of a high turnout. And we've had wonderful elections, how they've been processed in Eau Claire County. Every county has their difficulties, but one area we've never had a difficulty in is the process of elections. I certainly, particularly this election, wouldn't want to see problems because we are understaffed. Do you know if we are recruiting for that part-time position?
We are certainly working on a strategy, Supervisor Wilkie, to fill that need.
Strategy, okay. So we're not recruiting for it, we're working on a strategy, okay.
Again, there's as the process was outlined in order to post the vacancy, so we're at the point now where we're working with that department head to identify that strategy on how best to move forward.
Okay, does the governing committee have to do anything to get that moving, or is the task force empowered to actually get recruitment going? We haven't got time for a lot of strategy here, and I think the best strategy might well be to hire that part-time position. Does the governing committee have to do anything, or the board, to make that happen? Otherwise, the clock is ticking.
That would be the governing committee.
Okay, wasn't aware of that. I thought that was going to move forward without us having to take further action.
This is Catherine, and I can speak to that. We will begin the process with the understanding, Supervisor Wilkie, that is the intent of the Finance and Budget Committee to have that action occur. So we can begin the process and have it run concurrently with approval by the board.
Okay, I appreciate your input on that, Administrator. Now I grasp it, because I didn't want by any means there be a delay because the governing committee hadn't dotted its I's or crossed its T's, and you're telling me that's not the case. We'll make sure that we do it expeditiously.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. Administrator Shelf just answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Jessica?
Thank you. I'll just quickly go over the rest of these internal transfers here. If we could go back one slide. Thank you. So the ADRC did see 4 internally within their department, and then the district attorney, information systems, clerk of court, as well as Corporation Counsel, each saw 2 internal transfers. And the Facilities, Sheriff's Department, and Finance Department each experienced 1 internal transfer. The final slide here it speaks to recruitments that are currently in process, and then it outlines the funding sources for those positions. So 3, 4, 5 of those positions are under DHS, and it breaks out the funding sources for each of those. You'll see that it highlights for CCS that is those positions are 100% funded under that program. And then for the social worker positions is 44% levy, and then 50% state and federal, and 6% public charges. And then for our HR position, that is 100% levy. Are there any questions?
Supervisor Wilkie, your hand is raised. Is it again?
Oh, sir. Senior moment. I'll get my hand
Okay,
down.
thank you. I'm getting a little confused here. Thank you.
Sorry.
Supervisor Gatlin, I see your hand raised.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I commend Jessica for all this good work in gathering this data, but 2 things that come up, what Supervisor Bates said in reference to the complexity and the workload, I find that the percentages are not helpful to me. And also, if we're not including positions that are less than 40 hours, i.e. part-time, however you want to label them, I find that many of those would be essential positions, as Supervisor Wilkie just pointed out too. So I think it would be better if they were included. Because a position is not 40 hours a week, it's almost like you're saying that it's less important and requires less skills, but that's just not the case. We know that sometimes less than 40 hours a week works good for the employer as well as the employee. Thank you.
Okay, one more try at this. Supervisor Wilkie, did you raise your hand again?
No, I don't think my computer is cooperating.
All right. I'm getting a little dizzy from this, but okay. So I hear and see no other requests to speak. Jessica, is that the conclusion of your report?
That is, Chair Snyder. Thank you.
Thank you. Next are the written reports. You have in your file report from the Finance Department, the Contingency Fund, and the July 2020 payments over $10,000. You also have a memo from Matt Michaels, Senior Planner in the Planning and Development Department, regarding the electronics collection and residential clean sweep events. Are there any questions related to the written reports? I hear and see no requests to speak. Next are petitions of presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. First is a proclamation proclaiming August 2020 as National Women's Suffrage Month in celebration, recognition, and honor of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. You have in your packet that proclamation. The chair looks for a motion to approve the proclamation.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Bates.
Second by Supervisor Roberts.
All right, folks, let's use the chat. We'll probably have to help Supervisor Bates do that.
Supervisor Bates is on the phone.
Oh, well, it's hard to see your hand from that distance. I'm trying to handle this even-handedly. It's not working. Anyway, so we have a motion and a second. Approve the proclamation. Is there any discussion? Any questions? Okay. We can do this also by voice vote. All those in favor of approving the proclamation, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by nay. The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Next we have the a series of rezoning requests, and I won't read through all of them for the sake of time, but they will come back to us in the future meetings. Next, under item 8, first reading of ordinances by committees. From the Committee on Administration, file 55.
To amend section 2.04.10 of the code, rule 1, meetings, and to amend section 2.04310B of the code, rule 31, committee meetings.
At this point, just for clarity, I'd like to have an explanation either from Supervisor Bates or from the Corporate Counsel.
I can do that.
Please go ahead. I'm doing this because this is an ordinance change. So this would be first reading. We'd have to have a second reading, but just so people know what the content is. Supervisor
Mr.
Bates?
Chair, I would like to give the explanation.
Please go ahead.
Supervisor Bates, please, thank you. This particular ordinance simply adds to the one that is already in the code to make it more inclusive for the meetings that are being held right now, that are being held remotely by video or by a teleconference. And it includes not only the county board meeting itself, but the committee meetings that would allow supervisors to attend these meetings virtually. And this would actually hold until May 17th of 2021. And so obviously if something should change abruptly, I don't even know that we would change it. Would maybe wait for the next round. But that's the explanation for this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. So this will allow us to consider continue to meet virtually on WebEx. If this is an ordinance change, it will go to second reading at the next meeting.
A question on it?
Supervisor Schneider. Go ahead.
Does this mean that if after that time the ordinance is not renewed, that people cannot attend by WebEx, or it just means that it won't be universally held by WebEx?
Just to make sure I have this correct, Corp Counsel Sullivan, would you respond?
Sure. Right now, what the code says is that all meetings shall be held in the County Board of Supervisors chambers at the courthouse unless otherwise ordered by the board. And the amendment to that language goes through actually April 22nd of 2022, which is the end of the current term of the current board. If the board wants to modify it beyond that point, we would have to pick up another ordinance at that time and then modify it beyond that time. This was drafted primarily in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, not knowing how long it's going to last. We wanted to continue at least through the current term of the board.
No, thank you. So this is first reading. It will go to second reading and a vote at the next meeting of the county board. The next file is from the Highway Committee is file 58.
To amend section 10.01.010, or excuse me, 080 of the code, county highway single H.
This also is an ordinance change and will go to second reading next meeting. Just as preparation, I'm asking the Highway Committee to clarify what this is. So, Supervisor Henning, help with Supervisor Henning, you're still muted. There you go. Oh, there
you go.
Now you're on.
This is lowering the speed limit from Fairchild North up to that campground and restaurant and deer farm and that it's they're their business up there has expanded so rapidly, and the traffic from there south down to Fairchild has increased so much, and the people out in Fairchild all supported this, and so did the merit. It's merited to lower the speed limits there,
Thank you.
and the highway committee did vote in favor of it.
Thank you. So this will come back to us as an ordinance. It'll come back to us in second reading at the next county board meeting. We have no other items under number 8. I will make a correction. Our addendum lists the addendum item in section 8. It really should be in section 10 because it is a resolution coming from committee. So going to section 10, reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards under 2.04.160. Ordinances. First from the Committee on Administration, File 60.
Establishing a library planning committee for Eau Claire County.
Motion?
Schneider?
Schneider moves. Is there a second?
Second by Supervisor Jansen.
I'm sorry, who was second?
Supervisor Jansen.
Thank you. I didn't catch the name. Thank you. We have a motion and a second explanation. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Chairman Smyer. This particular process is beginning again. We have had a connection with the library for a number of years, in fact, since 1988. And in 2012, the library service plan was due for reconvening, but the library planning committee did not actually meet at that time and has not yet been done. And so this particular resolution is to, again, establish a library planning committee. And it consists of 11 members. It involves individuals, 2 from the county board and representative from the city of Eau Claire, Fall Creek, and Augusta libraries, 2 town board chairmen, 1 resident from a town that does not maintain a library, and 1 resident from a city, village, or town that maintains a library, and 1 representative from the Indian Head Federation Library System. This committee, when appointed, would have until December 31st to complete its work. And its purpose is really to review the current plan and agreement and to make recommendations as to any changes that may be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? Questions or discussion? I hear none and I see none at this point. So, I'm sorry, Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question in regard to the fiscal impact of establishing a planning committee. What department would this be under? The Planning and Development Department or some other jurisdiction? And number 2, how much, with mileage and so forth, do we anticipate the expense would be?
I'm not sure who would pick that up.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, this is an ad hoc committee.
Yes, that's correct. It's not a standing committee.
Chairman Smyer, this is Supervisor Pagonis.
Yes,
I can answer some of those questions.
Go ahead.
So I chaired the last time we actually made a substantial major change to the process that we currently have in place for the county libraries. And we had quite a few meetings and we met with some frequency because of it began in a contentious manner as a result of the the effect that the libraries were having on the town, on the different towns. And so we were able to reach a resolution on that. And I was unaware that there was an expectation that the committee would meet again in 2012. So this is new information for me. I have no recollection that there were any payments made, but they may have been, and I just was not aware of it. I was a county board supervisor at that time. And so I guess I'm confused. Maybe it was 2012 when we did it, and we were supposed to reconvene in 2017. I'm not really sure. But we met for several months when we were able to come up with our proposition, and it was accepted by the county board supervisors, and it was accepted in the towns. And my recollection is that Attorney Sullivan and I went to several town meetings to explain it and describe it. I'm sure Attorney Sullivan would have, maybe he'd have a better memory than I would regarding it. So I hope that answers Supervisor Leary's question. My question to Mr. Chair is, when would you be doing these appointments?
I assume as soon as we pass the resolution, we'll move forward on recruiting. I think we have to issue a call of some sort to draw interested parties. And so the answer to your question is ASAP.
Thank you.
If that's possible. I don't know how complex it will be. Corp Sullivan, did you want to add anything?
Supervisor Pagonis relayed correctly how I recall what happened the last time that we met as a planning committee. It was back in 2012. And I believe that there is language that we were supposed to reconvene in 2017, but that didn't occur. And so that's why this resolution is being brought forward at this time.
So that committee expired. It reached its end. Correct?
Well, there's regular reviews, as I recall, in the statute of the library plan, and we didn't conduct it when we were supposed to.
So that's what we're doing now. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I believe we were contacted by the representative from the Indian Head Library System, asking us to put this back on the agenda for recreation of the planning committee. That's how it actually comes to the board today.
Thank you. Supervisor Leary.
Thank you very much. That did answer my questions. I appreciate it.
Okay. I hear no other requests to speak, nor see any other requests to speak. I assume supervisors are ready to vote. We are voting on file 60, establishing a library planning committee for Eau Claire County. All those in favor, please indicate. We'll do this by voice vote. I think we can do it. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. I'm going to pull the addendum item to the end of this section. So the next item is file from the Committee on Planning and Development. It's file 56.
Authorizing the land conservation manager to act on behalf of Eau Claire County to enter into a cooperative agreement with Beaver Creek Reserve for the purpose of implementing a lake monitoring and protection network program.
Motion?
Dunning.
Motion by Supervisor Dunning, second.
Second by Supervisor DeLuca.
Second by Supervisor DeLuca. Explanation, Supervisor Gibson?
Thank you, Chairman Smyer. Over the past 2 years, the Beaver Creek Reserve, they've piloted a 5-county model of providing aquatic invasive services and lake services, working with the Wisconsin DNR. So this pilot program has led the DNR to revise state code, which is going to change their funding mechanism and allow for a similar network system in the future. So this resolution will allow Eau Claire County in participation with Beaver Creek Reserve to leverage the DNR grant funding from multiple counties to provide a more robust program than could be provided by Eau Claire County.
Thank you. Questions, discussion, comments? Supervisor Leary, your hand is still up. Supervisor Leary?
I'm taking it down.
Thought you were requesting to speak. Excuse me. I hear no other requests to speak, and I see none other. All those in favor of file 56, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 46.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Drammen.
Motion. Oh, I'm sorry. I should explain that even though this is an ordinance, the Corp Council advises me that we proceed to vote on it. So, motion. The motion?
Motion by Supervisor Gatlin.
Supervisor Gatlin, second by
Boyle.
Supervisor Hunter Boyle. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Explanation, Supervisor Gibbon.
Okay, this request is to rezone 6.25 acres of land from AB Agriculture District to A2 Agriculture to divide the existing family residence and adjacent woodlands from the remainder of the property, which will remain in the agriculture production. Okay? Now, as far as plans go, Eau Claire County's future land map includes the property in the rural lands planning area, and the town of Drammen's future land use map includes the property in the rural preservation planning area. The staff's conclusions is that they find that the proposed rezoning request substantially conforms with Eau Claire County's comprehensive plan. The town board action, the town of Drammen, they considered the rezoning petition and recommended approval. Eau Claire County's Committee on Planning and Development conducted their required public hearing regarding the proposal, and on a vote of 5-0, 5 in favor, the committee recommends approval of the zoning.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I hear no requests and see
Henning moves approval.
Okay. I'm sorry. I believe we have a motion already, Supervisor Henning. Is that correct? This has already been moved. Right?
Yes.
Correct.
Correct.
I'll come back to you, Supervisor Henning, for the next item, but on this item, we already have motion and second. All those in favor of file 46, please indicate by saying aye.
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 I'm sorry. All those opposed by nay. The ayes have it. It is unanimous. Thank you. File 49.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Clear Creek.
Okay. Motion, Supervisor Henning.
Moves approval.
Moved by Supervisor Henning, second by.
Second by Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Gibson.
All right, thank you, Chairman Smyer. This request was to rezone 15 acres from the A3 agriculture to A2 district to sell 5 acres of land to the neighbor to the west to gain more buildable land.
Is there more?
Eau Claire County's future land map includes the property in the rural area, ends in the planning area. The town of Clear Creek's future land map also includes the property in the rural preservation planning area. The staff's conclusions were that the staff finds that the proposed rezoning request substantially conforms with the Eau Claire County Comprehensive Plan. The town of Clear Creek, they considered the rezoning petition and recommended approval. Eau Claire County's Planning and Development planned their public hearing and for the proposed rezoning, and on a vote of 4-0, the committee recommended approval also.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? I hear no request to speak. See none. Supervisors, we are voting on file number 49. All those in favor of file 49, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by nay. It's unanimous. Thank you. This item is file 63.
Authorizing, providing for the sale of approximately 13,935,000 general obligation refunding bonds.
Thank you. Motion.
Motion by Supervisor Russell.
Supervisor Russell moves.
Gibson, second.
Thank you, Supervisor Gibson. Okay. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much more to say about this. Just for people's recollection, this was one of the borrowing debts that we took out when we remodeled the courthouse and built the jail. And this, I believe, is the last of our large items of debt. So it's currently stands at almost 14 million. As you learned from Sean Lenz, we would not be able to otherwise refund this until September 2021, which is a little more than a year away. However, because we don't know what the interest rates are going to be doing during that period of time, the proposal is to take advantage of very favorable interest rates, and we would have about a 0.3% amount that would be added to what's currently a 1% interest rate. So it would save approximately $2 million for the county in terms of debt service. So keeping in mind that if we get bids back that we do not consider favorable, we do not have to then proceed with the actual bonding. But this is a resolution to permit our bond workers to go out and basically solicit the bonds, and so then we will make a subsequent decision at our next meeting.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
Schneider has a question.
Supervisor Schneider.
The resolution says authorizing the sale, and it's my understanding that what you mean to authorize is looking at selling them. Because if we don't get what we want, we won't do it.
Correct. It's the solicitation for the sale of bonds. We're just at this point of soliciting for the sale of bonds to
so
see
does that resolution say soliciting?
Yeah, section 2, it says solicitation for sale of bonds. Okay. So we're authorizing and directing Ehlers and Associates to take actions necessary to solicit proposals.
Supervisor Pagonis is reading from the resolution itself. Right. Supervisor Schneider, you may be looking at the agenda item as it's listed.
It seems like the resolution says different than the title of it is, maybe?
There is a slight difference there, yes.
Because I don't want to get us locked in if it didn't turn out to be what we wanted.
The resolution specifically says it's for the solicitation of bonds. I think the tricky word in the title, it says resolution providing for the sale. And I think that providing is really intended to mean to go out and look to determine whether we want to do this. It would be very clear. And let me just say, Ehlers is pretty experienced at this, and we've had multiple meetings with Sean Lenz to discuss it. And so we would be foolhardy not to proceed with this.
Supervisor Snyder, is that sufficient for you?
We will get a crack at this again. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when proposals come back, there's an expectation there will be multiple proposals, and then Ehlers will recommend one of them that they believe is most favorable, and then that comes back to county board, and we up or down it, just the way we did a few months ago in our capital borrowing.
Right. I'm all for it. I just wanted to make sure we got to look at the product.
Yep, you will.
Thank you. Any other question or comment? I hear none and I see none. Supervisors, we are voting on file 62. All those, I'm sorry.
Chair Smyer, this is Janet. I do need a roll call on this because I do need to report.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I was about to say we have to do a polling vote. So let's see. Are you doing it or is Samantha doing it?
I'm ready for it. Or Samantha, are you?
Yeah, that's there. It's on your screen, Supervisor. And Supervisor Schneider, I think you vote for it.
What's the number of the resolution?
62.
And Chairman Smyer,
Yes, ma'am.
I would vote favorably for this.
Okay,
Yes.
We'll record a yes vote from Supervisor Bates. And I believe because this is because of the amount, Supervisor Pagokis, I believe we have to have a 2/3 vote.
No, Mr. Chair, this is not a change in the budget, and this is not a change in the contingency fund. So
it's a civil majority?
Yes.
Thank you. Who has the poll in front of
I have me, Samantha. I have two supervisors that are in progress that just need to submit.
Okay.
Did mine come through?
Yes.
Samantha?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think you've recorded Supervisor Bates.
Supervisor Anton?
Are you voting yes on this, Supervisor Anton?
Yes.
Okay. Please record that.
Hey, good to see you.
Supervisors Smyer and Supervisor Henning, I just need you to hit submit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I forgot to hit submit. Thank you.
And Supervisor Henning, submit.
Can you hear Henning?
Yes.
Henning is yes. I did poke yes on your board. Okay.
We'll record that. Thank you. Is that it? Is that everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
The system is just going to wait to run through here waiting on Henning, but it'll cancel out in a second.
Do we have a unanimous vote?
It is coming up. Just one moment.
Okay. We will wait. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay, good.
It appears to be a unanimous vote. So the file passes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is file 61.
Authorizing the expenditure of funds to conduct a forensic audit of the finances of the Department of Human Services.
Before we proceed with this, the chair is referring this file to the Committee on Administration, principally because that is what it states in the resolution itself. So this will go to the Committee on Administration and then come back to the County Board. The next item is file 45.
Approval of the 2020 gifts, grants, and/or donations to Eau Claire County.
Motion?
So moved. Bates.
I think that was Supervisor Bates.
Neiman, second.
Thank you. I guess we're going to do it by voice. So Supervisor Neiman seconds. Questions or comment?
Mr. Chair, did you want me to talk to it at all?
Well, I'm sorry. Thank you, Supervisor Pagonis. I lost my participant list. Go ahead, please.
Well, I would concede that it's self-explanatory. This is additional funding that came in, so it sort of requires what we would consider a slight adjustment to budgets. But this is, as I said, this is revenue adjustments, and this is something we would like to have. So I would just encourage that everyone vote and approve this additional gifts, grants, and donations to the county.
Thank you. Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have some questions, and I'm curious as to why, or if, or how we could potentially vote on these separately, perhaps by department. I think there was a public comment today, as there's been additional questions and concerns about the continued or perhaps increased militarization of our police and sheriff's departments across the country. And some of the grant monies, I think, will be better perhaps explained, or we may get some more information. There was a comment that the high intensity drug trafficking area grant will have further explanation to or at the Criminal Justice Collaborating Full Council meeting tomorrow. I think there's been a lot of questions. I don't believe we've had an update or perhaps a presentation to the full county board as to what that entails. So it seems to me some of the additional grant funding, I do have questions regarding, and it's difficult for me to say if I vote in total yes or in total no. That doesn't really represent my personal vote. For example, and this has happened in the past, and I didn't bring it forward as a concern. And so in hindsight, I wish I would have, so I'm doing it now. If I want to see the ADRC funding come through, but I do have some questions about particular grants, especially for me, some of the equipment, but the very last task force, the forfeiture funds are what I also have questions on. And I did have some back and forth email with Corp Counsel today regarding, and I'm not sure, is that 13,794 the totality of what? Is it seizure
grant
money?
I'm not sure who can respond. Supervisor Pagonis, Director Kirk, I'm not sure who.
Mr. Chair, I cannot respond to the specificity of Supervisor Cronk's question, but this is one resolution, and if it needs to be broken apart, then I would recommend that the county board chair bring it back next month in a manner in which it would be in pieces, and in the meantime, requests could be made for additional information from the Sheriff's Department. But as it stands, I think we've got an up or down vote on Resolution 45. And so I think the prudent thing to do would be to bring it back at a date certain.
That would be one of the choices. The other would be a motion to separate, but that would be very complex to do that tonight. It would take up a lot of time. Is there any urgency regarding this?
The funds have been received.
So we're merely confirming.
Yes.
Okay.
Supervisor Anton with a question.
Supervisor Anton.
I'm not familiar with the intent of gifts or donations being made to Clare County. When this comes back, would you provide some additional information about what this means? This is a new arrangement of financing that is not familiar to me.
Well, yes, I think it's incumbent on the, given the nature of the questions, I think it would be incumbent on us to identify whether these are gifts, grants, or donations, and keeping in mind that grants are items that have been applied for and received. So surely we could do that.
Since this is a matter considered by the Committee on Finance and Budget, I think that a motion to refer to committee with the intention of bringing a revised resolution back in the next county board meeting might be in order. Supervisor Pagonis, is that what you were?
Sure, fine. I'm happy to make that motion.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Schneider. Any further discussion? All supervisors, all in favor of the motion to refer to committee, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. The next item is file 54.
Also, authorizing the county clerk to submit a county election security sub-grant agreement to the Wisconsin Elections Commission for a grant to be used for election security needs.
Motion. I'm sorry. Supervisor Henning?
Henning will move. Yes.
Henning, second.
Second by Supervisor Russell.
Supervisor Russell seconds. Thank you. Explanation. Supervisor Pagonis, this is back to you.
Yes, thank you. So the county clerk applied and actually has received a sub-grant to help secure elements of the, I want to say our email system as well as other systems to help secure the upcoming election. So this doesn't, this won't substantially change the work that she has to do, but it will provide additional security in several areas. So my understanding is the grant was received and will commence. So we would like to be able to accept it, which is what this board would be doing, is accepting the grant for the funds. Otherwise, we would have to return them, and I don't think that's a good idea.
The questions or comments? I see a couple hands raised here. Try to do them in order. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have already been approved for the entire list, or do we have to decide, let's say we don't get all $43,000, do we have to decide we want this and this and this in our ranking order?
My understanding, and Madam Clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, but that we have been approved for the $43,025.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, they do give us the money up front. And by December 31st, I do need to give, or by February 1st, I need to give them a report. But the work needs to be done by December 31st. This information systems will be doing the bulk of this work, if not all of it. And it's going to be securing our email system and the internet. So it's just not going to benefit elections in total, but also the whole county system.
Thank you. Supervisor Crack, your hand is up. Did you wish to speak?
Oh, sorry, Lori in hand.
Oh, thank you. It is confusing, isn't it? Thank you. Supervisor Russell, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to
clarify or ask if this would also apply to securing that modem upload from the elections on election night? Will that be tested?
Assuming, I
Sorry.
was gonna say, I don't know, Jen, if you can answer it, go ahead. I was thinking if Dave is still on the line, he might want to answer that.
Well, to the best of my ability, it is a whole separate system, and it is its own firewall. And we also have a Cradle Point, which is another process that it has to go through. So I guess Dave could add if it's through our internet, but I do not think it is.
Okay.
Supervisor Russell?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I hear no other and see no other requests to speak. Supervisors, we are voting on file 54. All those in favor of file 54, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. I will now go to the addendum item file 63.
Authorizing the filling of the Operations Administrator position in the Department of Human Services.
Motion.
Schneider.
Right.
Sorry, there were a few people there. I think Supervisor Schneider moves, and who's second? Sorry?
Supervisor Bates.
Supervisor Bates second. Okay. Explanation is Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Chairman Smeyer. A little background here, first of all. The reason that this position was asked for at the beginning was that basically we have found that there certainly has been a lot of changes, not only in the way that we do business, but the contracts and everything else in human services over the last number of years. I think the comment by our finance director indicating his hesitancy to get involved and make projections in human services was telling. And mainly because a lot of the particular budget items that are projected in human services have a great deal to do with community behavior. We recognize the vulnerability of that projection quite some time ago and thought that basically one of the ways to upgrade the ability to be able to identify changes in streams, respond to those particular events, was going to require us to be really on top of things all of the time. And in that process, when we were evaluating what might help to resolve that issue, we proposed having an operational administrator, and mainly for the purpose of not only having someone who truly understands the programming, had management background, and certainly some additional knowledge in financial management as well, might help us to recognize sooner any changes that might be occurring, and also to know whether or not that particular change would have a long-term impact. That's how the position was asked for, well before these other incidents occurred in the budget for 2020, over a year ago. So in talking over the situation, I would like to now turn to Supervisor Schneider, who was looking for a more positive way to address some of the issues that have been occurring in human services for oversight. And I'm wondering if the chair would recognize her now.
Supervisor Schneider.
Thanks. Being new to the board has given me opportunity to look at county government with a fresh outlook and be impressed with the care and passion each of you has for your county. I know it hurts when county government has problems. We know about the good people doing good work, and it's just plain frustrating when problems keep happening. I submit this resolution to add another person to watch the administration and management of programs and fiscal operations across the Department of Human Services. Their job will be to see what processes, practices, and programs and support lines need to be changed or strengthened. Last year, you approved this position. It got derailed by COVID. Key aspects of this solution to me are that this person is internal, so they will know the systems in place intimately, and it's ongoing so that changes can be followed up on year after year. Hiring this person will not change what's happened in the past. Lessons have been learned, changes made. It'll be a step toward improving the administration of a big, complicated department so that its dedicated employees can keep doing the good work they do with better support.
Thank you.
And I might want to add just a little bit more to that. Keep in mind that as we look at Human Services budget, I serve on the advisory committee for the Wisconsin County Association Human Services area. Other counties throughout the state are having issues, as we are. And the issue for us is certainly as difficult as it is for them. When we talk about money being missing, there really isn't any money missing other than that was stolen. And that was reported immediately and taken care of immediately. The find of error in the budget that was really large was not found in spite of the fact that the finance director, the Human Service Finance Department, and even the audit did not find that error. And so it was really a surprise to all of us. The money is not missing, however. It was not stolen. There was no crime that was committed. Same as the money that was missing in the audit that was missed. There was not a crime involved in that. It was a bookkeeping error. So as we look at this and try to figure out how we can address really the prevention of an early intervention in any other kind of misdeed, I think this position is warranted. It is already in the budget. You have that figure in front of you. It's not new money. So thank you, and I hope you will support this.
Thank you. I'm going to give the sequence because we have 4 people wanting to speak. First will be Supervisor Wilkie, followed by Supervisor Beckfield, followed by Supervisor Russell, followed by Supervisor Gibson, followed by Supervisor Dunning. So, Supervisor Wilkie.
Well, I appreciate being first on the list after.
Oh, your hand is up.
Oh, well, okay. Now I'll try to get it back down when I'm done speaking.
All right.
If I can. I'm a little perplexed here. You know, you think about this a second. Monday evening, Tuesday before our board meeting, boom, we get an amended ordinance. Now, if that's not ramming it through like a choo-choo train, I don't know what is. It's amazing. First of all, on the positive note, I think there's probably finally come to a realization that we've got to take action and we got to stop minimizing the challenges and the difficulties and the poor performance that has happened over in human services. So there's a positive side to all of a sudden, boom, we've come with it. This is the idea, and this is going to be a partial fix or all fix. I don't know what it is. I'm amazed, though, in the past when other legislative efforts have been brought forward, they've been referred to every possible committee and their mother to be vetted. But now you're going to expect board members to decide that this is the appropriate thing to do. You heard, quoting what the audit said to us tonight, that you need a forensic audit, okay? And you need that before you start introducing things like this. I think there's a bunch of other ideas out there on what actions we need to take. I know I have some, I know other people will bring them forward, and we ought to decide the best of those options. But to do this, the 11th hour is inappropriate. It's like saying, this'll do it. We get another manager in there, and this manager is going to fix it. Well, we got a whole heap of managers over there in that department. I think they got a 1-to-8 ratio over there. I don't believe that it's going to make a significant difference. It might be one logical step. But no way, nobody can say that they've really taken a look at this 11th hour, literally, of asking that we scrutinize it. When I hear them say that, oh, we've got it all discovered and we know what has happened, we've got a alleged perpetrator of the theft, and we know what has been stolen, that is absolutely not true. That is why a forensic audit. I outlined for the auditor tonight for you what's the case for a forensic audit. And I described ours to the T, quoting from the criminal complaint. And he said, yes, that's, I don't recall his exact word, it's like a perfect match. You got to do that first, and then maybe this is one of many other ingredients that will be there. It also, bringing it forward at the 11th hour like this, precludes other supervisors for thinking it through, and maybe might support it if it wasn't crammed down their throats at the 11th hour, and also gives them then the option to look at for amendments. I would have thought this would have been referred automatically by the chair. He certainly did with the one on the forensic audit, and his reasoning was that it mentioned administration in the resolution. Well, only mention of it was that they would decide the scope in conjunction with finance and budget. All other resolutions of significant importance, and certainly we would all agree that the things we're dealing with are significant, we don't do at breakneck speed. It's interesting. We went from 0, in my mind, to 100 miles an hour all of a sudden. I'm glad we're speeding up, but let's use some common sense here. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that this be referred to HR.
Point of order.
I make a motion for referral to HR committee.
We won't interrupt the motion. Go ahead. Is that your motion? Just a moment, please.
Really, this has already...
Supervisor Bates, just a moment, please. Supervisor Wilkie, did you finish your motion?
My motion was to refer it to HR committee, and because it does have a fiscal impact of our efforts on dealing with our deficit, to finance and budget as well.
Okay. Before we have a second on that motion, I'll ask for Supervisor Bates to state her point of order.
Mr. Chair, this particular position has already been approved by Human Resources. It's already been approved by administration. It was already approved by the county board. This is to simply move the position from a list of those on hold and already in the budget back to Human Services. Thank you.
I asked for that point of order because if there's going to be any change to your motion, Supervisor Wilkie, it will come before there's a second. That's why I did that interim point of order. I'll ask now, is there a second to Supervisor Wilkie's motion?
Supervisor Gibson.
I'll second it.
I think I heard Supervisor Beckfield first there.
I want this referred to HR because it's an HR issue, and I do not recall ever seeing a job description or anything on this, and I'd really appreciate an opportunity to at least review it with my team.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second, we have your comment. We are dealing with the motion to refer to committee. Is there? I see hands raised, but I need to determine who is speaking to this motion. So I'll go down my list here as I have it. I'm speaking with Supervisor Wilkie, or we've spoken. Supervisor Beckfield. I believe next was Supervisor Dunning and then Supervisor Gibson. Supervisor Dunning, are you speaking to this motion? You're muted. Supervisor Dunning?
The referral motion? I'm confused.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. I'm trying to take this in order here. Supervisor Dunning. You're muted, Supervisor Dunning. Okay. Supervisor Gibson. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Supervisor Dunning, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Spire.
Oh, wait. Supervisor Gibson,
Pretty much everything.
Supervisor Gibson, hold on. Supervisor Dunning, now that you're finally on, go ahead.
Since this was approved by the county board and went through the whole entire budget process of 2020, this was approved, by the Human Services Department a year ago. And it's been in the process ever since and was part of the original investigation into the problem. So I don't know what we would gain by going back to looking at it through all these departments again. It's been through finance and budget. It's been through the human resources. It's been through HR or human services. So I don't see what we're going to gain from it.
Supervisor Gibson, I apologize. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Smart. I'm going to trailer exactly what Wilkie was saying because that is what I wanted to speak to. And the reason why, even though it was through a year ago, I don't see any information on that in here at all. And as far as it was deemed necessary by administration and finance, budget and finance, I think it needs to go back to them because I want to see there's no information in here. I want to see where they stood on it and their votes on it and information on it. Because I think Supervisor Wilkie has hit the nail right on the head.
Okay, I see 3 hands. I'll try to take these in order. Supervisor Steltzner followed by Supervisor Chilson. I'm assuming that you are speaking to the motion to refer to committee. Okay?
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Steltzner, go ahead.
So I'd like to point out that earlier in this meeting, our HR director gave us a plan as far as our bridge plan and the recruitment process. And in that, it listed several steps, one of which is that the position needs to go through, I have to go back, I think the administrator and human resources. So I think the fact that this was in the budget really is irrelevant because we're now operating under the bridge plan. We just reviewed what the bridge plan was. And so I think the motion that Supervisor Wilkie is making is consistent with what we just said our plan is to be. Thank you.
Just for point of clarification, Supervisor Wilkie, your motion was to refer to HR and Budget and Finance?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Steltzner, is that your understanding also?
It is. I'm supporting this motion based on.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'm asking. Sorry, thank you. Supervisor Tilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to make some comments to that, but Supervisor Stell just pretty much echoed all of my thoughts that I had intended to make, so that will end my comment. I just simply agree exactly with what he said.
Thank you. Supervisor Gibson, your hand is up. Is that again, or did you forget to take it down? Take it down, thank you. Okay. Supervisor Neiman, followed by, I think again, Supervisor Stelches. Supervisor Neiman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is if this gets referred to these committee, will it come back before the county board for a subsequent vote?
The answer is yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Stelches, are you speaking again, or did you leave your hand up? Thank you. Okay. I know it's confusing. I apologize for that. And I have to keep going back and forth here. Supervisor Coffey, followed by Supervisor Leary. You're muted, Supervisor Coffey.
We go back to the process that Supervisor Stell just spoke of, which I think is important to think through the bridge plan. If we go to page 13 of that process plan, there's a department assessment and evaluation of the position, which I think the department did, because as I understand it, was unanimously decided that that position should go forward. Then we go on to request approved by administrator and HR director. And then we go to recruitment. I see nothing about involving the finance, budget and finance committee. So I don't know. Can I make a change to that motion, or how would I move forward that we follow the bridge plan as we move forward?
Well, there are two options here. One would be to make an amendment to the motion.
The amendment?
No, we have a motion before.
Okay.
The motion to refer to committee can be amended, or we can dispose of it, come back, and consider what you're talking about. I'm just offering the possibility.
Yes, I think I'd make an amendment to the amendment saying that it will.
Excuse me, you're making an amendment to the
motion
to refer. Yes.
To the motion. Okay, so my amendment is that it will go back to the administrator and the HR director, and follow the bridge plan as this position goes forward.
Okay, the motion is in order. Is there a second to this motion?
Dunning seconds.
I'm going to take Supervisor Dunning as the second on that. We are now, this is becoming complicated, but we are now discussing the motion to amend the motion to refer, which has been made by Supervisor Coffey and seconded by Supervisor Dunning. So the chair will now accept comments on that amended motion. So I will call on people with their hands up, but I'm assuming that you will speak to that motion. So I'll wait a moment here to make sure we clear things out. I think the first hand here is Supervisor Leary.
Mr. Chair, I would like a recorded vote, so doing by poll both for the amendment to the amendment and back to the amendment. Thank you.
The chair agrees, and we will do a poll vote, I think, on all matters connected to this particular file. I think, Supervisor Leary, were you finished with your comment?
I am finished and I'll take my hand out. Thank you.
Supervisor, speaking to the motion.
Who?
Supervisor Beckfield.
No.
Supervisor Beckfield, your hand is up. Supervisor Beckfield. Okay. Supervisor Wilkie, speaking to the motion.
Speaking to that unique motion, I've never quite heard of being referred to the administrator before. It's a new one, but our chair has ruled it in order, which is puzzling
It's in
to
order,
me.
but the form may not be.
Okay,
I'm not commenting on the content of the
well,
motion.
how? Okay, do you have the power? As a question for the chair, do you have the power to rule it as out of order? Because it never have I heard such a motion, making a referral to a staff member.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Would you rule that motion out of order because of that?
I think that the wisest thing to do, no, let me finish, please. I think the wisest thing to do is to go back to the maker of the motion and ask for clarification along the lines that you're suggesting.
Yeah, where does it be? Okay, yes, please. And then I'd like to continue after that.
Thank you. I would love to clarify the motion. Thank you. My motion is to follow the process of the bridge plan on this position as it moves forward, and to go back to the bridge plan prior to resolving this resolution that was put forward.
Supervisor Wilkie.
Okay, I'd like the chair to rule one way or another. Is that out of order? Motion.
To refer, I'm sorry. Let me go back to the motion. The motion is to follow the bridge plan. Okay?
Yes, as this motion, as this hire goes forward.
A question for
Seems to be out of order.
Wait, slow down just a moment here. Supervisor Wilkie, I believe that the motion is in order.
Okay, I was waiting for your ruling on that. Okay, strange motion. The chair surprisingly has ruled it in order. Did I hear you correctly, Mr. Chairman?
Correctly, yes.
Okay. I would highly recommend that you vote no for the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Supervisor. Oh, wow. We have 3 or 4 people here. Supervisor Stelzis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I see Supervisor Coffey's point, and if we're reading the words in that PowerPoint slide, it does say the director and the administrator. And I also share Supervisor Wilkie's concern that that does seem a little odd. So if I understand correctly, I think what Supervisor Coffey is saying is follow the bridge plan. And if I'm not mistaken, did we not actually write the bridge plan into code at our last meeting or the meeting prior to that? And perhaps rereading that code might not exactly use the same words that the PowerPoint slide does. So I think
Council.
So yeah, so I think.
Sorry, I was asking for the Corp Council to give us some guidance there.
Yeah, I mean, a PowerPoint slide is not a plan.
I understand. I'm asking for the Corp Council to respond now.
Right. What the bridge plan was adopted by a resolution, and it was to identify issues and solutions with regards to that were created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then subsequent to that, there was a plan that was submitted and approved by the board by the county administrator.
I think the question from Supervisor Stelz's is that in code?
It's not in code. It was resolution.
Back to you, Supervisor Stelz's.
All right. Well, then just let me touch one more thing. Does the resolution use the same words as the PowerPoint slide?
Or council?
Not that I'm aware of. The resolution was just enabling resolution to create a bridge plan, to create a task force to identify issues, and to propose solutions.
Supervisor Stelz's. You saying
Yes, I know.
And then what I would add to that is that what happened after we adopted the bridge plan, or you adopted the bridge plan, is that there was a presentation that came back to the board that was approved by the board. And that's what being referred to through that PowerPoint. That was the plan.
So it is the plan that we approved use the same words, talking about the staff members versus committees. I think that's the issue here.
I don't have the plan in front of me. I'm assuming that's what's being read by Supervisor Coffey.
Yeah. Is Jessica Rubin here with us yet?
I don't know. Jessica, are you online? I don't see her in the list of participants that I have. And she was smart, she left.
If I may speak, this is Nancy Coffey. If you look at page 11, it lists the bridge plan, and it's during May 5th, 2020 County Board meeting. Supervisors voted to approve Resolution 20-21/016, authorizing the bridge plan related to the COVID-19 pandemic and to create a task force to address issues related to COVID-19 crisis. And then below that, it lists, you can click on the actual resolution. Let me see. If I do that, I want to save first what I've got here. All right. Oh, it goes all the way back to the agenda of that May meeting. So
I'm going to go on here, Supervisor Coffey.
Okay.
Calling on Supervisor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman Smeyer. I just wanted to point out that if the board does choose to go with the amendment to Supervisor Wilkie's motion or to kick it to admin and the HR director, you're essentially giving your decision-making ability as an elected official to paid staff.
I think to be clear that the maker of the motion clarified that the motion is to follow the bridge plan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It wasn't specifically stated to refer to administrator and committee. Follow the bridge plan, I think, is the motion.
Correct.
So Supervisor Roberts, does that?
Thanks.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Schneider has a question for Coffee when you get around to being done with your list.
We're around to it. Go ahead.
The reason I didn't say fill it following the bridge plan is, I guess I assume since we voted for the bridge plan that we sort of assumed that if you're saying take it out of the deep freeze, that you're assuming it will be done according to the procedures that we would use, which would be apparently going through the administrator and the director of HR. I didn't know that needed to be stated.
Well, this is a motion made in regard to a position that the committee is attempting to fill. And so if we say follow the bridge plan, we're saying follow the bridge plan in regard to filling this position. And that's exactly what would happen. We actually have here it is an amendment to Supervisor Wilkie's motion, but it's a substitute amendment, meaning it completely replaces it. So if we were to vote on this now, what we're voting on is following the bridge plan in the hiring of this. I forget the name of the position, but the position that is being sought. Is someone speaking?
Administrator Schaaf, I think, is speaking.
Oh.
Very quietly.
Well, Supervisor.
Not at all.
Administrator Schaaf, you must be under a blanket or something. We can't hear you.
This is Catherine. I was not speaking.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I could hear voices in the background. I'm sorry. Supervisor Pagonis, I think. Supervisor Pagonis, is your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reading the bridge plan. It does not, the actual bridge plan that we voted on does not refer the positions held by the bridge plan. It does not refer them back to the administrator and the HR director. It doesn't say that. It has a lot of other things in it, but it kind of skirts around it, but it does not at any point say open positions will be referred back to. I think that what we're looking at is what Jessica Rubin stated. That's not what the actual bridge plan states.
What does it state in regard to, or does it state anything in regard to filling a position?
Sure. Well, it talks about using vacant positions and attrition consistent with prioritized activity, positions eligible for recruitment during the COVID crisis responses are positions funded by grants, critical service areas. Managers will continue to review processes and functions. For all positions that are currently vacated or anticipated to be vacated, the positions will not be eliminated from the organizational chart and funding will be withheld. We will attempt to redeploy affected employees into positions that are open. So to refer back to the, and then it goes on to talk about the task force. To refer back to the HR director and the administrator, I believe is out of line.
And what would be, if the intent here is to fill a position which had already been approved but apparently held, what would be the procedure?
Well, I don't know that that's, I think that Corporation Counsel should probably weigh in on that. That's not something that I truly understand. And in fact, Mr. Chair, if you recall, yesterday we had this exact discussion about a 0.5 position in the county clerk's office. And we were told that we have to go through all kinds of procedures and go back to the COVID task force. I came away from it very confused because then, of course, we saw on the presentation, it wasn't even included. So, you know, I don't know what the role of the COVID task force is supposed to be, whether they're involved. I personally think that HR committee should be involved. I agree with Supervisor Stelgis. It's like, where's the position description? Supervisor Stelgis is on the HR committee. He doesn't recall it. It represents a 3-line description in last year's budget, and then it was a position that was not filled. I think it does, and it sounds like the current proposal for the position is a change from what was originally put into the 3 lines in their budget. I could read that to you if you're interested. But I think that I'm just saying a point of order to Supervisor Coffey's amendment is that it does, she's referring to a PowerPoint presentation. She's not, or at least I don't believe as I read this, that she's actually referring to the original Bridge COVID Task Force and how positions will be handled.
However, we sort our way through this, the intention of the original file was to hire a position which was already approved but held because of the COVID stuff. So I'd like to find a way back to that to make a decision about the advisability of that hire.
Well, Mr. Chair, all due respect, I'm suggesting that the resolution that's been presented, just because it has the same title, it has a substantially different position explanation than what was originally put into the budget book.
Thank you.
So I think it's a different position and it does need to be reassessed.
Mr. Chair, just a clarification. I wonder if Don Cable listening in?
I'm sorry?
Would you look and see if Diane Cable happens to be listening in? Is she one of the individuals listening in?
Let me see.
Because it was the understanding this came back to the Human Services Board.
We have call-in users. We have call-in users, but they're not identified. We just have numbers. So I will ask, is Director Cable among the call-in users?
Yes, I'm on the phone.
Okay. Supervisor Bates, did you?
I wonder, we just had a Human Services Board meeting to try to see if we could get some help in being sure that we were moving along with our plan. And Diane, we talked about what this position would do based on, in fact, we asked for the position description. Would you comment on that?
Director Cable?
Yes, I can give some comment with regard to that. And this is, as you've been discussing, coming before you today as an approved position that was approved as part of the 2020 budget. And it was our understanding through discussion with the county administrator that because it sat on the bridge plan, that this moving forward with filling this position altered that bridge plan, and the county board would have to approve if this position could move off this bridge plan for us to be able to move forward in the process of filling this.
So if
the position, I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
The position is, as what was described, it's a broad position that provides leadership and guidance and management with the programming and operations and fiscal operations for reporting and analysis across the department, working with the key leadership within the Human Services Department.
Just a further question. Was that
I'm sorry, wait. I'm looking at the resolution as it was brought forward this evening, and I'm looking at the last whereas and the now therefore. Whereas by authorizing the position of Operations Administrator to be removed from the list of positions that are being held by the bridge plan, the county board will be taking action to provide resources necessary to continue to enhance financial systems that support departmental operations without the expenditure of additional funds. Now therefore be resolved, the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors authorizes removing the position of Operations Administrator from the list of positions that are currently being held open in response to the bridge plan that was created by Resolution 2021-017 and authorizes the Department of Human Services to begin the process of recruitment to fill this position as soon as possible. That seems to me to be a very clear statement of the intention of the resolution.
Chairman Smeyer, Beckfield.
Supervisor Beckfield.
by their own admission, they just said they changed the job description. And what that job was way back last year, I would suspect would need to be substantially changed, or the directives of that position would have to address the issues that have come up since then. And that's why I also object to this resolution, because HR has not reviewed the job description as it is today by their own admission. They said that they have made changes and reviewed those changes yesterday. So I vote that this.
We're not,
I believe
not voting. We're not voting.
Mr. Chair, I believe that's a misstatement. We did not change the job description. We asked for her to give it to us.
I'm looking at the paper that you presented as the resolution. And let me say it again. Authorizes removing the position of operations administrator, that position as it exists now, whatever the description is, from the list of positions that are currently being held open in response to the bridge plan. So the reference is to an existing position which has an existing description. I'm going on the basis of the document we have in front of us. That's what we're going to be looking at. So in my opinion, that's very clear. Remove the position from the list of positions that were held open and authorizing the department to begin the process of recruitment. That's the proposal. There's nothing in there about change of position description. It's the position as it was, frozen and now thawed out, and authorizing the department to proceed. That's the motion. I mean, that's
the motion was for referral, and then someone said something.
We have
About a bridge plan.
We have before us now the motion that was made by Supervisor Coffey. We have to dispose of that motion how we wish to do that. And that would be my position, my suggestion. Dispose of that motion and go back to the original file and vote on it. Very clear. I don't think there's any.
Speak up.
Point of order, there's a motion to refer as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, we have Supervisor Coffey's motion, which is to follow the bridge plan. We have to dispose of that somehow.
Why would that supplant Supervisor Wilkie? I don't understand that at all.
Let me finish, please. Please let me finish. This is taking a tremendous amount of time. It's not necessary. My suggestion is dispose of both of those motions, beginning with Coffey's, going to Wilkie's, and taking us back to the original one and vote on it. That's my suggestion.
I am willing to withdraw my motion.
Well, I'm sorry, you can't withdraw it.
Oh, okay.
Once it's been seconded, it's on the floor and you can't withdraw.
Okay.
My suggestion is vote it down. And that's how we move back. Go back to Wilkie's, vote it down. And that takes us back to the original file. Does that sound acceptable? Just to make it simple. I see 4 or 5 hands up here. In the interests of simplicity, I'm going to move to a vote on Supervisor Coffey's motion. We're going to move to a vote on that, but we have to dispose of these. So if you want to move back to the original motion, the way to do it is to vote down Supervisor Coffey's motion. All those in favor of Supervisor Coffey's motion indicate by
saying a written vote, please.
Poll.
You want a poll vote? We could do that. Let's see. Madam Clerk, are you handling the polling? Thank you.
Samantha has the poll vote up.
Okay. You have the poll vote in front of you. Please vote now.
And this is down on Coffey, or this is up or down on Coffey's motion?
That's correct. So a motion of no, a motion of yes would mean we move forward on it. A motion of no, a vote of no means we are disposing of it. Please vote now.
Mr. Chair, I'll vote no.
We'll
To
record that.
supervise the date.
We'll record that vote.
Mr. Chair, could you repeat that one more time, please, what we're voting on?
What we're voting on is Supervisor Coffey's motion to refer this to the bridge plan. And my suggestion is, if you want to get back to the original motion, the original file, vote this one down. If you want to. 4 copies.
Supervisor Schraffnagel, no.
Okay.
Supervisor Dunning, my vote thing disappeared.
Oh.
Is anyone hearing Supervisor Schraffnagel?
Yes.
we heard you. Supervisor Dunning,
Okay.
your polling is going to be in the bottom when you click on your iPad. If you click on the 3 buttons.
Okay.
Polling.
Okay.
Supervisor Stelgis, we are waiting on you as well.
And you heard my no. This is Schraffnagel.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Point of information, Anderson.
Yes.
Would it have been in order to move to postpone the amendment to the motion to refer?
What?
Postpone indefinitely?
Technically, it would be in order, but it would be, they would consider that to be dilatory, meaning necessarily delaying.
Thank you.
So we have 25 no. And 0.
No.
Sorry?
Anton, no.
Oh, and I'm sorry. So, and we added, is that 26?
It would be unanimous no.
Okay. It is unanimous no. We are now back to Wilkie's motion, and I'll say the same thing. If you wish to go back to the original file and just vote on it and dispose of it, you would vote no on Wilkie's motion. If you wish to follow Wilkie's motion, you would vote yes. So let's do the poll vote.
Mr. Chair, I will vote no. This is Bates.
We don't even have it up yet, so.
Supervisor Smyer, before we vote, is the motion that's currently before us actually in order, because it takes away from the bridge plan's operation?
The motion is in order. The motion was made and seconded. It is in order, and we are voting on it.
It's in order, but does it then meet the guidelines of the bridge plan?
That's not a relevant question in terms of the.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
it was my motion. Can I say one thing
We're
before
voting.
we vote?
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
You know, I would point out to you in the resolution, they're stating 65K, but if I recall correctly, in the bridge plan, the cost of this position is $75,982. I think the inconsistencies of this, the question if there's a job description, if it's a changed position, don't run it through quickly. I'm glad finally people are seeing the urgency of the problem over there. That's a positive sign. There must have been an epiphany. I don't know what happened, but that's great. But at least allow HR, and if there's really opposition, God forbid, that Budget and Finance looks at it, and make the amendment eliminate Budget and Finance out of it and just to have it referred to HR. Let's clean it up so people can make a vote on it. So I ask you to support my amendment.
My suggestion is to vote your motion down, and when we go back to the main one, then you can make a motion to postpone to time definite. You could make a motion to amend. That would be simple.
Well, I've already made a motion to refer, which essentially does the same thing, but at least it gets looked at and studied, rather than the night before our board meeting, we throw something at board members. So I appreciate the fact from the chair you're choosing to vocalize your opinion, or maybe I don't appreciate it. Well, regardless, you are. I would suggest, okay, pretty strong one. I would suggest that you vote for the referral. You're going to get a shot at it. We're not going to do like has happened with past legislation, stall it. We will bring it back before you. So support referral. You'll get it back for
Call the
certain by
question.
next board meeting.
Call the question.
Okay.
Second.
Supervisor Penning has made the suggestion to call the question. Before I call this question, that is Supervisor Wilkie's motion, I want to ensure that we've had sufficient discussion and feedback. Is there any other supervisor who wishes to make a comment about Supervisor Wilkie's motion?
Pete, please clarify the motion.
I have my hand up.
I see hands up. Hold on, please. We have a request to clarify the motion. Supervisor Wilkie, do you want to do that, or can I ask the clerk to do that?
I'd be happy to. It's not a complex motion.
Go ahead.
I am moving, and it's not out of the ordinary motion to refer this resolution to Budget and Finance and HR.
Okay.
I would like to speak as well, Mr. Chair.
Hold on, Supervisor Bates. I have to keep scrolling around. Sorry. I have 4 hands up. I'm going to start with Supervisor Jansen.
Thank you, Chair Smeyer. My question is, you know, as you reread the way that this resolution is written, it seemed to me that it was written in a way that we have been following the bridge plan, and that's why this position has not been filled. And so this is something that is special in order to get the position filled. Does that sound correct, that this has been evaluated by the bridge plan, but it's been held off for now because of that?
Are you speaking about Supervisor Wilkie's motion or the original resolution?
I think they kind of go hand in hand, because if it is...
Sorry.
Well, with all due respect, they do, because if it is a special evaluation where we need to get extra input on whether or not we make a special exception to not follow the bridge plan, then I would support referral. So I'm just trying to get clarification on that.
Supervisor Wilkie's motion doesn't have anything to do with the bridge plan. It has to do with referral of this item to 2 committees. That's why I say it's Supervisor Beckfield, I think, would be next.
Well, if the changes in the job description haven't happened from last fall till today, the pay for that position also has changed, up $36,254. So not only would I argue that we've changed the position, which, okay, we've decided we haven't, but you've changed the dollar amount that was asked for from last fall. That's why I believe it should go back to HR so we can review it and make sure the job description is correct and that the pay is commensurate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could you check with Diane and see whether the amount there was for a full year or whether the original one was for a less than a full year?
It was amateurized, or whatever that word is.
Mr. Chair, this is Supervisor Pagonis. The bridge plan, I'm looking at the list. It says annual wage for the organizational administrator, $75,982. And the resolution as it's presented has a wage that's substantially higher.
The fact sheet? I thought it had a 60 something.
for 7 months. A 7-month, 65,000 for 7 months. And that the arithmetic on that goes up to 112,000 something. 112,236.
Was not in the budget.
It is not in the budget.
Folks, in the interest of time and not wanting to camp out here all night, let's find some simple way to resolve this. I'm going to suggest that in order to go back to the original resolution, we deal with Supervisor Wilkie's motion. When we come back to the original resolution, then we can dispose of it the way that you are suggesting. It's the will of the committee. Supervisor Henning has made a request to call the question. At this point, I think that we have pretty much spoken our piece. So I'm going to call for, we'll do a poll vote on Supervisor Wilkie's motion to refer this matter to the Committee on Human Resources and the Committee on Budget and Finance. I think that's the motion, correct? Yeah.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So vote as you will. Let's move on this thing.
Mr. Chair, I will vote no. Bates?
We'll record Bates as no.
Did you get mine, Samantha?
I have not yet, but I'm sure it's coming through.
Mr. Chair, Carl Anton, I would vote yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Schroffnagel, no.
Thank you. We record Schroffnagel as no. Anton is yes, Schroffnagel is no. How are we doing, Samantha?
I'm waiting for Supervisor Schneider's email to come through. Supervisor Kronk just needs to submit.
If my email isn't coming, I can give a verbal vote.
Looks like we have 17 yeses and 12 noes.
Okay, so the motion does pass. The item has been referred to Finance and Budget and HR. And what is being referred is file 63. So we will look for HR. I'm reading into this motion. We're looking for HR, as Supervisor Beckfield said, to take a new look at this. Is that correct, Supervisor Beckfield?
Absolutely correct, and we will vet it as best we can and make sure that it's handled correctly.
Okay. And Finance and Budget, is it clear to you what it is you're doing with this?
We will look at if there's any change in fiscal impact.
Okay, thank you. And then we will
Was
look
there any sense of urgency to your motion, or was it?
That's a question directed to Supervisor
Supervisor Wilkie?
No. I'm sorry, excuse me.
If I can answer that, I'd be happy to.
Yes, please do. Please do.
I will make a pledge to do it with all due speed. I won't do like some other resolutions to stall with it. I will get it back to you as soon as we can on the board floor so you can vote it up or down.
Supervisor Anton, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
May we also have a comparison between what Diane does and this person does, because these are obviously shared responsibilities.
That's a little confusing. I'm sorry. They're quite
Diane has
different.
responsibility now, I would assume, for all of what is covered here. This new person comes in, and it would be helpful if we knew what Diane was going to do and what this new person was going to do.
I'm not sure how to respond to that. I would assume Human Resources will be looking at that.
Supervisor Beckfield.
Yes, please.
Supervisor Anton, I will supply you with a job description of both the director and this new position. How's that sound?
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe we have disposed of this last item. I hope that's correct. This has taken us quite a long time. Thank you for your patience this evening. The last category of items was appointments. I don't think we have any. Is that correct, Samantha?
That is correct.
Okay. We have reached the end of our agenda, supervisors. This meeting is adjourned, and thank you for your participation.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County.